Hello, hello, hello. You're very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I am Daragh, that is Shane.
Hello.
Two brothers from Ireland talking all things rugby, obviously from the perspective of Leinster and Ireland. This is number 79, and we're going to be looking back on an incredible game. The return of Test Rugby came back with a bang in Bledisloe, and we've got another game, the second in the series, to look forward to this week in Eden Park as well. So we're going to open the show digging into Bledisloe, and we're going to talk all things New Zealand and Australia for the opening portion of the show. We're then going to look at what would be top of the billing in any other week, the Champions Cup final, two European finals in fact this week, the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup.
That's right.
We're going to look at those games, preview those games. We're also going to look at the opening of the South American Four Nations competition, which is starting this weekend as well. Should be an interesting little window into Tier 2, and also Argentina and their sort of reserve team and what youth and talent is coming through in that competition. And we're going to also look at Super Rugby Unlocked in South Africa. They had the opening round last week, and we've got a few games coming this week. We're going to take a look into that. And finally, we're just going to wrap up the show with all of the news of the week in rugby terms. So yeah, action-packed show in store for all of you guys, and I dare say we'll be going at this a while.
Yes, indeed. And again, if you're new here, you're very welcome. If you enjoy the content, please do like, subscribe, and hit the bell button. But also drop a few comments is the main one, because we enjoyed the conversation, and we had a few good ones this week. He'd love to hear your thoughts on things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We do read the comments, and it's a minor goal of the show to get sort of good, thoughtful rugby conversation going, and you guys contributing to that is always good, and always makes us feel good as well. So yeah, absolutely, leave a comment down below. But without any further ado, because there's not much room for ado in this jam-packed show,
another stacked one, so we'll get crack on.
We're going to look ahead to
Bledisloe.
Yes, indeed, Bledisloe 2. The All Blacks against the Wallabies. It's a drawn game last week, so they're going into this game in Eden Park, which is going to take place as it did last week at 4 a.m. our time.
Yes.
So it's a little merciless from the schedulers on that front, but it's Sunday afternoon in New Zealand, and it's going to take place in Eden Park and in Auckland this week. But before we dig into this week's game, I don't think we can sort of overlook
what happened last weekend.
Yes, because that was a treat.
It was phenomenal. Yeah, we were obviously treated to one of the best games the Bledisloe Cup has offered up in many years. Last week in wet and windswept Wellington. It was just a really, really fantastic game of footy, played in great spirits by both teams. To be honest, Australia brought it. That was kind of the dynamic was really the shock that the first quarter was pretty much all Australia. The All Blacks definitely had their chances as well, and then it obviously ended with such a humdinger of a finish. There's a lot to unpack.
It was incredible. We stayed up for the game. In fact, all bleeding night up at 4 a.m. I dare say we'll be doing it again this weekend. But I got to say, up at whatever godforsaken hour it was by the end of it, but we were just sitting, big smiles on our faces, because it was absolutely the right decision to watch that game live. It was very, very special. It was incredible game of rugby in awful conditions. The wind and rain of Wellington, as we know, where the All Blacks have struggled in seasons gone by, and they did again. I thought that they had many positives early doors, the All Blacks. I thought that they were they were getting on top of the Wallabies up front. They put them under a lot of pressure.
Yes. Their forward pack in general performed excellently. Their set piece was rock solid. Their line out for the first half especially looked like a well-oiled
Sam
machine.
Whitelock and Tui Pilatu, very, very good heads, very, very good line out operators. And in there they were commanding in the line out, and their engine room was so rock solid in the scrum that even when Slipper and Tupou could get on top of their props, their opponents in their counterparts in New Zealand colours, the power wasn't there because the engine room from the All Blacks was so strong. So their pack actually looked pretty solid, and they were. I thought they were edging the contest. I thought Sam Cane was everywhere. And was getting on top of them, and then they did manage to get a few scores. They got their counter-attack game going. There was a nice little piece of interplay for Geordie Barrett's try, which came off a loose Australian kick.
It did, yes.
So as much as Australia were bringing it, the All Black pattern was being set. And then just before half time, obviously you had that moment where Fainga drops the ball and New Zealand go the length, scored one of their classic brilliant counter-attacking tries.
Fantastic to look at,
and a real warning sign for Australia that you can't make any errors, because it's going to be 7 up the other end. And crucially, Rico turfed the ball over the line.
He did, He was also he had a foot on the line, as people, eagle-eyed viewers, were pointing out, for that counter-attacking try. It wasn't a great showing from Rico, and we were very excited for him, because he had been the Form 13, but between that turf try and just a few other, like he was a little at fault for the Australian try later, I thought as well. He kind of bought in, totally very narrow, and then Jordy Barrett was basically in the 13 channel, which was no coverage at all, and they managed to spread it wide.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I thought for all of their sort of impressiveness up front and for all of their building the nice 13-3 lead with the nice set piece try, they were they struggled in many areas, and I think it showed it towards the end. I thought they were very conservative again.
Yes.
Which was...
It kind of goes into this pet theory we've been having where it's just the All Blacks have kind of changed in terms of their mentality a little, and the aura is definitely kind of somewhat diminished. It's definitely a new team. So that I give them scope for some justification for it as well. It is the first outing for the coach, but it was curious to see. They were very keen to kick the 3-pointers apart from drop goals, which we'll get on to as well.
They kicked that 3-pointer to make it about 8-3, and then you thought it was fine because they did get the tries. Their counter-attack did look sharp when it was given opportunities, but they struggled to create.
They did.
The whole Rico Ioane, I think you're right to point out as having not just with the turf ball, although that obviously was massive, but generally speaking didn't have nearly as good a game as he had been having,
nor as good as the debutant in the opposite jersey. And
absolutely. I thought the whole
Paisami for Australia,
Hunter Paisami, outshone him. But I thought the whole 3-quarter line were outshone largely. 10-13. I thought Monga, Goodhue, and Rico, and even Leonard Brown when he came on, really struggled to create and didn't try. They played into themselves. And it's very much not... I know it was wet weather and you have to respect that, and it's Test rugby and you have to respect that. But to see them playing so differently from how they played in both Super Rugby Aotearoa and the North v South game was definitely a little concerning from their point of view. I thought they were, they very keen to kick the ball. I think Scotty Stevenson tweeted during the game that it was like the All Blacks' plan is to wait for Wallaby mistakes, and I actually thought that was very fair. Like, they do have an excellent counter-attack, but they're not creating or even trying to create much in the multi-phase, even when they were edging the physical contest. I mean, I remember there was a few times Tui Pilatu or Sam Cane got really dominant carries, broke a couple of tackles, went down, and they just set it up. There was no urgency about them.
Yeah, until the very end, when they did go from one end of the pitch to the other with a brilliant dynamic multi-phase, because the game was on the line.
Yeah, and they were winning contacts still. They looked stronger. Caleb Clark was causing horrors.
Tremendous.
Sututu as well.
Also brilliant off the bench.
Charging through the Wallabies. And so from that point of view, I thought it was clear to me that they could have and should have been a little braver on the ball,
for sure. And then obviously the Rico's 7 points on the floor would have changed the game. It was possibly the game killing play at that point, because Australia, for all their game in the first half, they were really wasteful of their chances and their opportunities. If we want to pivot onto them, it was a sign of impatience where the All Blacks, you were critical of them for maybe being a little too impatient or too patient in terms of kicking the ball and being content to set things up, playing wet weather rugby and playing within themselves, as you say, particularly the 3-quarter line. Australia, I feel, were just a little the opposite. They were a little helter-skelter when they got into the red zone. Even though they were putting in great phases. Nick White had one of the games of his career, setting a wonderful tempo, testing the All Black fringe defenders where there often are spaces.
I thought so much of what they did with ball in hand, you're right to point out up until that area, but I thought so much of it was actually really refreshing and really great to see. They were like the halfbacks, Nick White and James O'Connor, both playing the best rugby of their lives.
For sure.
And they did, you're right, they drove a really, really nice tempo, and even though I thought the All Black pack was bigger and stronger, the Wallaby pack with that go forward ball were getting over the game line. They were putting on a bit of
Philip, who I was worried about, brilliant footwork on the line. He was winning contacts and setting up plays.
Tupou in the early stanza as well, from tight head, putting on a load of footwork, always getting over the game line, getting quick ball, good ball presentation, and moving it again. And they managed to put some very, very exciting phases and very exciting attacks together.
They definitely did.
And it was refreshing. I mean, you had debutants Paisami at 13, you had Daugunu, who we were talking about as a highlights machine, and came in.
Even Banks at fullback also
added to it.
They were solid. They were all solid. It was an amazingly assured performance from a brand new team. That much is definitely true. And they you're right. They put it together. lovely sequences of play in the middle. There was an issue when it got to the 22, really, the opposition red zone, where they're just a little too keen. We pointed it out in the preview last week as well, where it's just, maybe it's from rugby league, I was thinking, because a few of them looked kind of rugby league-ish, but Matt Tamua was the guiltiest party, because he's there as ostensibly as a second receiver, which is a big part of what Australian rugby has been about in the professional era. Dual distributors, 10-12, a lot of width, a lot of speed, obviously a good idea. But you were pointing out correctly that there were a few instances where they put that sequence together. They were 10 phases deep, and it was Tamua who was in the deep in the second distributor role, perfectly in space, and had to throw maybe a 10 or 15 yard pass that was on to break them. And instead, he'd either truck it up or, like on 5 or 6 occasions, drop it on the toe, like you'd see in rugby league after 6 phases, just kicking it away.
Yeah, there was
very wasteful.
A lot of that from Tamua, and I actually don't think he wasn't in the wet backing himself, especially off the left hand, but actually off the right as well. He wasn't backing himself to throw that 10 to 15 metre pass, and as a result, a couple of times he did drop it on the toe, and that's like where the All Blacks' problem has been, sort of conservatism and almost lethargy. The Wallabies, it's impatience. There isn't that understanding, and like they really they didn't even know how much they were causing the All Blacks issues. Obviously there's a few times when Tuangafasi or Kane got in, or Mackenzie as it was, got in over the ball, and they have to be mindful of that. But generally speaking, especially even around the fringes, they weren't getting smashed back. The ball wasn't slow, and even when it did slow down, Nick White and O'Connor had enough subtlety in them and enough good play in them to speed it up again.
Willing forwards to win contacts as well.
Especially against the All Blacks, when you look at how they lost games to Ireland and to South Africa, and even to England last year.
England as well,
They really don't like defending for long periods. They don't like it when teams go through the phases against them. I even thought against Australia they were a little unlucky in some regard, because they were fouling. I thought Sam Cane in particular had a great game, don't get me wrong, but I thought he really did push the boundaries, especially when it came into the 22. It was that old All Black cliche, they weren't rolling, they were holding on to guys for a little longer, and they just seemed to get away with it. But they will they will sort of wilt in that way when you're in their 22 and you're causing them problems. So the Wallabies need to not be like looking for a killer score so much as just keep the pressure going, cause New Zealand problems, and whenever they did that, they had them in trouble. So in general, I thought the Wallabies really did step it up. I thought there was a ton of positives. Great forward pack, great young team, playing with a lot of hunger, good controlling halfbacks, lethal finishers on the wing, absolutely exposed Rico, caused him a horror show, and that's a really interesting one now for the All Blacks, and we'll talk about the squads in due course.
For sure.
But yeah, I thought I was very, very impressed with the Wallabies, just notwithstanding that one critique that they just need to be that little more clinical, and even like it's counterintuitive, but we're going to talk about European rugby. Exeter are actually clinical. Statistically, they're one of the most clinical teams in the league, and yet when they get into the 22, what do? They just truck it up, and it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of trust and graft in your fellow forwards almost sometimes to constantly resource the breakdown, to not let them get a hand in, to not turf the ball. But if you can do it, especially in this matchup, I'm not suggesting that the Wallabies, I wouldn't suggest for a second the Wallabies beat Exeter. But especially in this matchup, it would have been nice to see them just appreciate that you can hold the ball, you can take it through phases.
I was counting, they got as high as 13 phases at one point before they kicked that one away, and it's like, it was just, you can go through 20, like take it another, like just go and set it up again. And it was mainly Tamua was the guilty party, and in terms of that, he was the big problem, because he's in as a dual distributor, and he wasn't effectively distributing. In fact, if he was just burning chances, and the very last one he did, where they were in the red zone with a chance to win, and he just kicked it into Damien Mackenzie's path, that was the most egregious. But it was a symptom of just, as you say, impatience. And the other caveat as well to a very impressive Wallaby display and a brilliant debut test for Rennie, Dave Rennie. There was Falau Faianga at hooker was an issue. There were overthrows. He made what was potentially the game-losing play with that bizarre drop off the set piece off the line out.
He tried. It was a curious one, because as you rightly point out, it was a move with a shortened line out and 4 men. Hooker comes round and plays scrum half, but he's popped it inside to the scrummy, and a winger coming on the other end. And actually, it was the exact same move the All Blacks executed perfectly for Aaron Smith's try. But when the Wallabies had to do it just before half time, they did. the one thing, and we'll get into that as this week in Eden Park looms, the one thing that they, no matter how well they play, simply can't afford to do, which is just switch off for a moment, get a little awkward, and then compound that by just dropping the ball.
Yeah.
And he was curious when he tried to pop it inside, but actually sort of slipped out of his left hand, and then when he passed it off his right, it banged off his left hand, went flying into the air, and then landed, I think it was at Sam Cane's feet.
Scooped it up, and
that was all
the transition was beautiful. I think
it
was Geordie Barrett with the main try the main try making pass before Rico dropped it kind of over the head backspinner one, and it was a similar pass from George Bridge for the set piece try as well. Pull back over the top, beautifully executed but difficult skill to do. And it was good to see both wingers doing that from an All Black point of view, because that's just good distributing principles that are there. They are still lethal when you give them chances like that. So Folau Fayanga, between that and his darts, himself and Tamu were the main kind of source of that cheap turnover ball that the All Blacks do prey on, so they need to minimise that.
And just those small margins probably cost the Wallabies. I mean, the main story of the game, as we mentioned, was that sort of last 10 minutes.
10 minutes were fantastic.
It was. I mean, it was edge of the seat viewing, just from a fan's point of view. That sometimes you just have to sit back and just appreciate what you're seeing.
It started with an epic kick that could have been. It might not have been if that kick went over. It more than had the distance from Reece Hodge.
Good from about 60 or 70.
Around 60,
Might have been 70.
Well, in terms of, it was still massively airborne when it landed off the post, and then the All Blacks showed good savvy to not play the ball off from an offside position and cough up the game right there. But then the main story that both have been kind of harassed at, because both had opportunities to chip over a drop kick, and neither did, and I don't quite know why.
Well, it was wet,
it's windy in Wellington, the kickers were struggling, but even still, you need to be in the
Wallabies one was interesting. They got the ball back after that kick, and obviously helter-skelter excitement. They worked it around the fringes a few times, and then they just sort of delayed the whole process. They did a goofy little move. Jake Gordon, the scrum half, did a little loop in the tight with a forward carrier,
which ended up with James.
He was kind of lost then when he got the ball back. So Connor took it to the line and took a carry, and then everything slowed down, and they were sort of off on the right hand side. And I actually think they would have gone for it. I think just as they were working their way back onto the posts, they lost the ball. And frankly, there was a moment in there where the All Blacks were lucky not to concede a penalty.
That's
again.
True.
It was on the blind side to the winger, but if the linesman was alert, I can't remember who it was. It might have been. I want to say maybe
it could have been Satutu.
Tupovai. It was. I think it was Satutu or Tupovai.
Yeah. But it was definitely hands in the ruck for sure. There was a potential call there, but then they snaffled it back after that steal, unfortunately, and then got stolen again.
Kurandrani did it. It was an illegal steal, but then the ball just came out and Kurandrani picked it up, so the ref just sort of went, okay, play on. So they got away with that one, but then the Ardi Sevilla steal was clean, and then we just saw the All Blacks for the first time all game really going hell for leather, really moving the ball, actually showing the bravery that we know them of. Like the whole game, they didn't come close to running it like that. Like, they ran it out of their own line because they knew they had to. And they were brilliant. They got all the way to the other try line. They didn't do that for the whole game, not from anywhere in their own half.
It showed shades of that try they scored against us from all those years back, where they did have to do it.
It wasn't just us. They were making a habit of it. They did it every year.
But then, just crucially, they didn't get there. Be it drop goal or the finish, they didn't actually win. Whereas the All Blacks, certainly of 2015, would be just in a match just like that, where it was ding dong, and arguably they deserved to lose, but they would find a way to win. They didn't that time, and that is a doubt for them.
They got all the way to about 1 yard out, and they were picking and going. And as people rightly point out, really that's when, like Australia, they should have calmed down and taken the drop goal, especially in the context of that game. And I actually think if Beauden Barrett were on the field, that's exactly what he would have done. Beauden's been taking a lot of drop goals. I think they missed him in all kinds of ways, frankly. And the other factor in that, like, Mo'unga had a pretty quiet game and a poor game. He didn't kick that well.
He kept getting smashed.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I think what contributed to it, and there's been a little chat about this, but I noticed it live, that the Wallabies were hitting him pretty late every time. That was another thing that just wasn't refereed. So it's not like the ref was favouring one side or the other. I think he did both sides favours in different departments, but certainly the Wallabies in that one, because I think they were getting away with some marginal hits on Mo'unga, who then didn't look himself. He was sort of receded into himself, and there's when the All Blacks are on the try line, there's this curious picture when the ball does slow down, it gets a little slower, and you see Richie Mo'unga walking all the way from sort of a roughly pocket region, just slowly walking towards the left side of the ruck. And he ends up sort of next to his scrum half, and I'm not sure if he's giving a message, but I'm just not sure what he's doing.
Yeah,
and then the next thing that happens is they sort of just try and speed it up again, and TJ throws a bit of a loose pass that they have to dive on, and then it gets turned over, and that's sort of it.
And but in terms of balancing in the penalty act, I thought in that turnover there could have been a penalty against Australia for the first man into that breakdown who just went straight down off his feet. But then it was also 89 minutes, so a bit of justice in the draw, I thought, was the fairer result. Despite all
when the dust settled after that hectic piece of play. And listen, we're being a bit critical. It was a glorious piece of play. The boldness to move the ball as the All Blacks did, the bravery, the handling, it was all superb. And I thought that the Wallabies, really from minute one, in a wet day, they did cause the All Blacks problems with their kicking game. Nick White put lots of bombs up, and Damien McKenzie really struggled to deal with a lot of them. The wind, it just made it so difficult. And Nick White had it on a string.
Banks as well had some lovely touch finders in them. They kicked very well.
But generally speaking, I thought that they were very brave in how they played. When they did have the ball in the All Black half, they drove a lovely tempo. They backed their hands. Their hands were good. They did not, apart from that Fayanga one, they didn't give the All Blacks cheap turnover ball. But they did play good, quick, aggressive Wallaby rugby with a lot of footwork from forwards and backs. So generally speaking, it was an epic game. I thought the standard was crazy high, and it was just beautiful to have Test rugby back.
And the first haka back was an emotional charged one as well. It was just great for all kinds of reasons to have Test rugby reopen with Bledisloe.
I was giddy watching the haka. I'm always giddy watching the haka, and it was fantastic.
At stupid o'clock in the morning over here, and it's haka time, and you're like, but just a fantastic test overall. So I suppose we'll move on then to previewing the one coming up, because obviously it ain't done. They have four tests between these two teams, and it's a draw, so that counts the same as a win as far as Australia are concerned.
Because a 2-2 draw would have meant that
New Zealand retain.
That New Zealand retain. So a 3-match series suits the Wallabies just as well. It didn't hurt them in that regard. The defeat in the context of the series. A draw is as good as a win for this one game only, and now it's a 3-match series where they've got 2 home games and then this game this weekend, and they need to win 2 of those, and they'll win their first Bledisloe Cup since 2000. I want to say,
is it 2000 or 2002?
2002,
I think. Which is just an amazing stretch of time, and this Wallaby team just looked so assured. I would love to see them give it a go. But as for this game, Eden Park, the Wallabies haven't won a match there since 1986, which is 34 years ago.
34 years and many games.
So that's obviously a formidable record. The All Blacks have just made that place a fortress, and it is true that the cake tin has always been a dodgy, scuttery one for them. But in
Wellington,
all the ways
the wet can be a game leveler in the way that
it definitely isn't conducive for all black rugby at its purest. Whereas Eden Park is definitely the kind of cathedral to all black rugby.
Their spiritual home. If just to contextualise that, 1986, 34 years ago, the last time the Wallabies won there. That's before the first World Cup. David Campese and Michael Lina were playing, and they won the game 22-9 a long time ago now. The All Blacks themselves haven't lost in that stadium since 1994 against the French.
Unbelievable.
Which again, pre-professionalism. Their record is, superlatives don't even do it justice. It's an incredible record. Yeah,
for sure. But that being said, the Wallabies will be bolstered from that game one, and surely records are set to be broken, and all records do fail eventually. The Wallabies will fancy themselves with a crack this week after last week's showing, and it's definitely probably their best chance in close to 10 years to get the Bledisloe back.
Well, they have won games. This is good though in that they've got the 2 home games coming up. They did beat them last year in Perth. But to get this result away in New Zealand and to have 2 home games coming in a 4-match series,
that would obviously be
that is
huge.
massive. It's definitely a huge chance for them. We're looking forward to it in that regard. And in terms of the squads this week, like we thought last week, we're going into the first game. There's all sorts of question marks, but after this week, we'll get a good flavour.
Yes,
and I think in the case of Australia, we have got a good flavour of what they're going for.
Yeah,
but there's in some ways more question marks this week than there were last week.
Yes.
From an All Blacks point of view, I mean, there's a few changes that you could consider. I thought Caleb Clark and Satutu off the bench, those were 2 guys who I would have started, and I still would start them. I think they're excellent players, and I actually think Artie Savia As he's a good jackler at number 8, and he does work well enough in the loose, but I don't think he's the same force at 8 that Satutu is, and I think he can move to 6 really well.
Yeah.
And then the question is, do you want Shannon Frizzell off the bench, or do you drop potentially Ardie to the bench and have him come on with a blaze of glory? I think they're all options.
They're all useful options. Ardie off the bench has been formidable for them before as well, when he can come fresh into a game at 60 minutes. They can definitely tinker with that because they have legitimate options. Similar to the wing, Caleb Clark obviously impressed a lot, would be worthy of his thing, but I actually didn't think between Geordie and George Bridge that they did a hell of a lot wrong themselves. I thought they were pretty solid. I thought both of their contributions for what was a try in Aaron Smith's case and what should have been a try in Rico's case showed that their nous is there and that they're very good options.
Well, there's a couple of potential tinkers there. I thought that Rico had a shocker.
Yes.
Rico had we were really calling for him. In fact, I was buzzing for him. I thought he was going to really, really improve and fix their issues at centre. He looked great in Super Rugby Aotearoa. He was brilliant in North-South. He showed very good defensive reading, good defensive hits, great pace. I couldn't speak highly enough of his performance this year at 13. And then for him to come and just be sort of lost in his own head, out of the game, just a very, very sloppy performance. First of all, putting that foot in touch, frankly, for that first try, didn't get punished, but he's running down the sideline, he's no one there, he does a little jink and just doesn't have the spatial awareness. He knocks his toe out, and another day that's called back. And then obviously the one that was there, his trademark try scoring finish, but in the wet and wind
it's
of
not
Wellington,
a percentage play.
Not a percentage
play.
We've
seen Billy LaRue do it before in Wasps colours, that little jumping finish and drop, but it's just an ignominious one. You want to be finishing when you're in that position.
It's really bad in Test rugby. And then as you rightly point out, the Wallaby try where James O'Connor got outside him, he found himself incredibly narrow. He wasn't making those sharp defensive reads, and I just think he looked like a guy who was not comfortable for pretty much the whole game. And I think my own gut is that he might be. He's been so good this year that it's something perhaps worth pursuing to keep him there, to try and get his confidence back. But obviously that's a call for the coaches who are with him in training. And so that's one that could go. And then I think the other one that they were looking at, they brought Damien McKenzie in at fullback to cover Bowden, and there's been a lot of talk in New Zealand about Geordie Barrett perhaps at fullback, and then that's kind of how you might fit Caleb Clark in.
For sure you can, and then switch George Bridge.
I personally like Damien McKenzie in there. I just think, especially without Bowden Barrett, he does make errors at times, and in the wet weather they can be punishing sometimes under pressure. He
certainly the high ball, the box kick in the wind and rain was playing havoc with all the back three, to be honest.
George Bridge struggled with that as well. The wind just
it won't be as much of a factor in Eden Park, we suspect, because that cake tin is pretty surreal for that apparently.
It could be wet weather rugby, but it's not going to be quite Wellington cake tin rugby. But he tends to, when he's in the team, even if he does make errors, he sort of appeals to the better angels of the All Blacks in terms of getting them to attack. He's definitely an All Black player for sure. Well, there were other things in terms of squad news. I know Lemape joined the training squad, as did Ioane, because apparently Bowden Barrett, Josh Ioane, young kid. Bowden Barrett wasn't at training today. It's Wednesday as we shoot this, and he was conspicuous by his absence at training apparently. So there are legit options. That's a real blow. He is their best player. And as good as the All Blacks are, he's one guy they miss. And they missed him last week. They missed his leadership. He would have kicked the drop goal. I feel like he would have been more of a threat in that midfield where they had very little threat. As good as DMAC is in terms of the counter attack and the dual distributor role, he does that pretty similarly in go forward. Bowden is a little bit physically larger than him, he's probably quicker than him,
probably a little bit quicker. And in terms of defensive tackles, obviously I wasn't giving DMAC much of a chance against Corabetti in that corner. I thought Corabetti was finishing that 9 times out of 10.
He had the gas on him.
Bowden in that scenario, I even the odds a little. I'd still probably edge Corabetti in that position because Rico was the one who got narrow.
I think Bowden has those clutch tackles.
He's one of the best defensive guys in it. And if you go with Geordie at fullback instead, that's a little bit more of a solid, less counter-attacking option. He's definitely a big guy, so it would be reactionary to the high ball. He's not vertically challenged at all. He's one of the bigger fullbacks you'll see in World Rugby. He was obviously rock solid as well. It just would change a little bit of the dynamism and spark, which was already lacking a little bit in the wider channels.
Yeah, well, that's my sort of fear. Look, I still think they have great instincts on counter-attack, as you rightly point out, and I think if you see Geordie in at fullback and maybe Caleb Clark in, I think that might be an indication because of how the All Blacks want to approach this, because as frustrated as we are with the lack of creativity on multi-phase, there might be an understanding that there was a way to win that game, even without, you know, the mad creative plays and the crazy risky wet weather plays, which is just to be more physical and to use your physicality more, and yes, to go around the corner and to maybe punish that Aussie tight, those Aussies in the tight, because it's like,
well, they very nearly did that. If Rico dots that try down and they go that far ahead, then that could have been the dynamic. That could have been the whole story of the game, because the All Black physicality was there to be seen.
But like, even just with a little more continuity, like in an ideal world, Philip in the lock, instead of making plays on 80 minutes, that looking fresh as a daisy for a young man, would have like 25 tackles made, and would have had Tui Pilato running down his channel all day, and perhaps wouldn't have had the energy or the sharpness left in him, like was the case with Mo'unga, to make the play at that stage in the game. So I think they might, if Jordy Barrett plays, it might be an indication that they're going to be looking to just physicalise, as our sort of term in the year, as Ryan Baird put it. But it just out muscle and hurt the Wallabies for being just that little bit smaller than them, so that they might go that way as opposed to the more creative way with selections. But there's decisions to be made. I don't really know what the answer is. I think it's a decision for the coaching staff. There's merits to each choice,
for sure,
and there's a lot of talent in there, but I'd be curious to see what they do.
I thought their tight five performed admirably. Certainly their starting tight five, both at scrum time and in the loose. We had tight head turnovers at 60 minutes. Tuamafasi looking great with the hair.
Tupou shone him early doors from the Wallaby perspective.
Tupou kind of gassed, as most kind of heavily dynamic, explosive athletes do. They kind of are at tour de force for 25 minutes and then kind of gassed again, whereas he was plugging along like a tight head should, and then he came up with a big steal on 60 minutes, which is encouraging for sure. Like, there was a lot of positive here as well. Obviously won't feel that way. I think bitterly disappointed was the way Sam Kane put it immediately after.
Don't be saying that, Sam.
Don't be saying that. That's not.
You start turning into an Ulsterman.
No good. But then just from the Wallabies, for flip side, they obviously weren't bitterly disappointed at all. No. Selection, they still have a few headaches. Obviously, we cited the two kind of glaring little flaws in the whole thing was Folau Faianga and Toumua, to be honest. Although Tumua's a couple of his defensive hits were getting some traction, as far as like, look how impressive this hit is, which is obviously nice, but I thought he needed to the dual distributor thing.
I do think it hurt him. I don't think that they necessarily need to get rid of him, especially if they're not confident in what the alternative is. But I certainly think, like, you know, you got Ire Simone, who was very good in Super Rugby, who I think is probably due to make his debut, certainly before the end of the Rugby Championship. Maybe they won't brave him for the Eden Park game, which is like their toughest game of the year. But like, Reece Hodge, I know he's at 13, but like, would he do a worse job than Tumua's doing? Like, he's nice and physical, he's got a great boot, he's got good hands, very good understanding of the game. Like, I think Reece Hodge should be starting. I don't think Tumua's a better
I certainly
footballer.
have more faith in Reece Hodge than Toumua. Toumua kind of makes me scared a little bit when he has the ball. He just kicks it away too often.
Well, there was he kicks it away too often, and then there was a moment in the first half, one of the few moments where the Wallabies did give the All Blacks a chance on counter attack, where he just went to deck and lost the ball, and the All Blacks picked it up, and thankfully they didn't make anything of it on that occasion. But it was like, there's a sloppiness to him.
Like, when you're against the All Blacks, you don't want to give them turnovers, and he was a turnover machine a little bit in terms of, they were generally very good at not doing that, but he was an exception. But then they obviously Ire Simone for Toumua could happen, or Reece Hodge. Jordan Bataya is another one who's licking his lips to get into that centre combination. I liked the debutant again, the debutant at 13.
Hunter Paisani.
Yes, I thought he was brilliant in the physicality, and yet still a little untested on D. We still don't quite know how this 3/4 line will function when the All Blacks really come putting the heat on. But it's like nice to see a combination of youngsters who are available. And actually, I see you have here Loliso as well. Noah Loliso at 10. Another young guy.
He's a 20-year-old who they rave about, and we were wondering if they get him in there. I think it was telling that, you know, when the game was on the line, they didn't. They stuck with O'Connor, which probably makes all the sense in the world. You don't bring a guy on with 10 to go in a tie game with the All Blacks.
Yes, especially when your guy O'Connor was playing some brilliant footy. Like, to be honest,
like I think going forward, if Loliso is as good as he might be, you know, we'll have to see him to judge. But like, O'Connor at 12,
could be brilliant.
Could be a great option as well. So that's all to be decided. And then maybe is there a case for Ulesi in for Faianga at hooker?
Possibly. Depends how much you want to punish him. Do you want to give Faianga a chance but really scold him and say, listen, the arrows were not right? the errors were too many. Bring that down. It's your jersey on the line.
It's another call for the coach who knows him and might know whether or not to trust him to deliver in Eden Park or to be a bugbear as he was last week. That's one for the Wallabies. But I think generally speaking, we're expecting pretty much the same team.
Much the same team. I still have my doubts. Certainly, like Philip really impressed me, and Loto was much better than he looks much. Salakai Loto looks much bigger than he did in the World Cup, which isn't even a year ago. But he looked very small as a number 6 at that level, whereas now he does he has seemingly filled out his frame and looks physical enough for the second row. But my question is, I don't know that they were properly tested by that All Black display in the Wetton thing. We don't quite know.
They did have to cope with a lot of physicality. What I would say is I don't expect that to change because Rob Simmons came on and gave away a penalty that cost him 3 points.
He was very poor.
That's that's not going to be rewarded.
Negative contributions from the bench rarely are rewarded with starts. But that's pretty much it on squad news, I guess. But just I suppose we can pivot into kind of the winning conditions and what both teams will be looking to get out of the game and how they want to pursue the game in Eden Park, starting with the All Blacks who are at home. So the question mark: how do they want to use the ball?
They can't be happy. They can't be happy with how they played last week. I thought it was we sort of touched on it already, but there was a conservatism to what they were doing, and there was also almost a lethargy at times. They were winning contacts and not exploiting that. I remember a few times when Tui Pilatu got it like a soft ball off Aaron Smith, and he trucked it up into contact. And won the contact, and then there was almost no one there to support, and the Wallabies weren't there either, and they sort of jogged it up and hit the ruck and maybe set up a box kick. So there was no bravery to them. I think you just pointed out, like you were talking about from a Wallabies perspective, how does Hunter Paisani look in defence? Like they had a 13 on debut, and the All Blacks didn't test them. They didn't really flood that channel and attack him. And not bad weather notwithstanding, I think the last phase revealed that absolutely they should have been probing those wide channels all game.
Well, there were 2 debutants out there between Daugunu and himself. There was ample opportunity to be pursuing that space, but they didn't quite function that 3/4 line as we pointed out.
I think there's a couple of ways they can go about the game. But there's 2 areas that I'd like to see them massively improve: creativity and bravery in terms of running the ball from their own half, because we know they're instinctually very good at it. If they have an overlap, they'll use it. If they do get the better of a contact, they should be running off one another, trying to get the offloads through the contact. And generally speaking, they're very, very good at reading how and when to pick those lines. And they just need sort of the encouragement and the freedom to be allowed to go and do it. So I definitely would love to see that. And I also think that and this is the one that I'm more sure that they will bring this week, is just this raw sort of mean physicality. Like they were at home last week and they let the Wallabies rough up their 10 without riposte. They didn't punish the guys on debut physically enough despite being bigger than them. And I expect a much meaner All Black performance. I mean, there's been a lot of the chat has been interesting. Like I was very, very encouraged by the Wallabies, and I still am, don't get me wrong. But, David Campese has come out in the media this week and said sort of the aura of the black jersey is gone. They do this every time, the Wallabies. They get one positive result and now they're just tempting fate and poking the bear. So David Campese is coming out saying the aura of the black jersey is gone. The Wallaby media is like, oh, here we go, boys. This is going to be the year. The All Blacks are gone back. And then meanwhile, like Aaron Smith came out and gave like a sort of he was the guy that had it in the presser, and he gave very sober appraisal of his own game, which I thought was actually quite harsh. But he was saying, like, I was putting Richie under pressure, my passing wasn't sharp enough. I was looking at Nick White's performance and he really helped them, and he gave them the impetus, and that's what I want to be to be doing
for sure.
And so he was sort of in his own head,
even though he did get one up on Nick White for the try, he kind of ran over him.
Off. Like, I didn't think Aaron Smith was the problem at all. No. I thought mentality wise they should have moved it more, but I actually thought he played okay. But he was saying, like, there's a level that I wasn't at, and I'd say that there's like there's a lot they can use for motivation going into this week, and the Wallabies are sort of poking the bear again. So I expect, if nothing else, I expect them to bring a much meaner, higher energy game in those tight contacts.
Saw bits of it from the likes of actually Sam Cane for the most part was mean enough in the contact area last week, but you'll need a few more to step up.
Like if Artie Savia plays and Shannon Frizzell, they need to bring that energy. Like I thought most of it was coming from Tui Pilatu and Kane in the tight. They got guys who can run the ball. They got Cody Taylor. They got Tuamafasi. They got Frizzell. Even if they bring on Tutu, if they bring him in, there's like, they have a lot of potential to just get on top of the Wallabies, and the Wallabies will need to be pitch perfect again to withstand that. So I really do expect them to try in the early exchanges to bully the Wallabies and to let them know that it's sort of a different animal they're playing this week, in the hopes that they might buckle under that kind of pressure. But yeah, generally speaking, I'd love to see them play a bit wider and express themselves a bit more, because the difference between that last week, what we saw in a black jersey, and what we saw in the North v South game was just night and day. There was no freedom to attack. There was no gutsy plays, and the rugby suffered for it.
It's true, and yet despite all that, they can click into gear just like that in terms of instinctive transition play. The transition for the try that wasn't, which we will mention just one more time, but it was a beautiful look when the wide shot, just as Kane scooped the ball up, got it to Barrett, and then when Barrett flicked that pass over the top, you could see, like a PlayStation game, the row of black jerseys just perfectly spaced, perfectly there, and just ready to run it in. It could have been any number of them who scored the try, and it ended up being Rico who didn't. But it was still just a little sign that it wasn't quite working for them, and yet when that loose play came, they transitioned like that. So the Wallabies still have to be concerned.
When they had the North v South game, when they had Super Rugby Aotearoa, and there was less, rigid coaching involved, and there was less of a sort of exploitative game plan, it doesn't behoove the All Blacks to play within themselves. It behooves them to outplay their opponents, because they are gifted.
Make it about skills. If they can make it a shootout, they win. Like pretty much all the time. It's a question of how they do that, and part of that will be how they defend. So how do they play without the ball? Because as we were saying, Australia will, hopefully the message will be to try and be a bit more patient and to go through more phases, which means the All Blacks need to be ready to repel that. And how will they?
Well, yeah, I think despite conceding a couple of soft tries, Rico Ioane's defence, in particular for Koroibete try, like the try the other week, Daugunu's try on the other side was a result of good phase play from the Wallabies, but it was also, there was a bit of chance involved with DMAC getting the ball, and it was just like, it's very, very harsh to blame Mo'unga because he was in position, but just he was roughed up and sluggish, and so he kind of just sort of moved very slowly towards the ball and didn't react, and Nick White was able to flick it up for Daugunu, who got a great score. But there was a first phase try conceded, and then that try, which was sort of a little bit of a chaos moment. But generally speaking, they did sort of manage to contain, and they were patient, and they got some steals. But the Wallabies did cause them problems. They moved it quickly. Well, so there's a few sort of key adjustments. Like, it's nothing major, but there's a few adjustments I'd like them to make going into this week. I think firstly, they should give Nick White problems.
And James O'Connor between the two of them. Because as we were saying, Mo'unga was roughed up. Aaron Smith was citing his own accuracy probably through the pressure, whereas Nick White was pulsing all game long.
And there were a few occasions where he was allowed to probe around the fringes, like he'd pick it up and then he'd think about going for it, and then sometimes he'd give the ball again, sometimes he would go for it and he'd win the contact. So it's something that the All Blacks don't really do that well on defence, is watch the sniping nine. They tend to like to just move off and be like second guess the pass. But get your pillars in there and rough him up. See that he hits, like, don't be stupid, don't give away penalties, but see that he hits the deck more often than he'd like, because that's something that slows a team up as well. Like, if Nick White picks the ball up, one of the things he can be a divil for is taking a few steps, checking the line, and then giving it, like Genia before him. And if he does that, you can punish him. You can, like, he may have thrown the ball, but I'm going to give him a shove, and down he goes. He's not at the next breakdown, or at least not quick enough.
Well, it was telling that Caleb Clark came into the game last week like a bat out of hell and bullishly carried him. I think his first carry up the left hand side, Nick White was in his way and got scattered and then was bloodied from that contact. So force him into a few collisions. He ended up going off after a tremendous game. But it was a sign that just on either side of the pill, rough up that 9, and same with the 10, because it was noticeable. Mo'unga was nowhere for that drop goal play and was obviously a bit sluggish for the try that they did pounce on, whereas James O'Connor in the 70 odd minute when he had the chance to kick for the lead, you were noticing he was fresh faced and he was smiling up at the post.
Actually, there was one of my I didn't mention it, but it was one of my favourite moments of the game was when O'Connor kicked that kick to give the Wallabies the lead, what would have been a 3-point lead, because there's just a look on his face where he can barely contain himself. He knows he's going to get the kick. He knows he's putting the Wallabies in front in New Zealand against the All Blacks, with a few minutes to go, and you could just see this look on his face, which is like, this is everything I want to be. This is everywhere. This is where I want to be in life. This is just brilliant.
Yeah,
he's like a pig in shite, and I just thought it was a lovely moment, and I do think he had a lovely performance. I was actually going to say one of my points. You can't rough up everybody, but I guess they can give it a go. But one of my points was actually to get on top of Tamua, almost more than O'Connor, because I think that like we cited him as a problem for Australia. If they do go with him again, he panics on the ball.
He does,
and sometimes he was given too much time, and he managed to truck it up, and it was okay. But if he has Leonard Brown, or he has Goodhue, or he has Rico in his face, he's not going to throw the pass that might be there to throw.
He'll sooner kick the ball away than throw the pass.
He might try a panicked kick, or he might tuck it in the jumper and take a big loss. So I think he's a guy they could really target to actually stifle what the Aussies attempt to move it wide. And then lastly, just in the 13 channel, I don't think that they can allow themselves off first phase, particularly like citing that try, to get too wide. The Wallabies have killers on the wings, so whatever's in 10 and 12 and a back rower need to sort out what goes on inside of 13, and they need the onus is on them to sort of get out and fill that space. But the second Rico or whoever's picked at 13 gets a little too narrow, like Tamua might not throw the pass, but they have plenty of players who will. Nick White will, James O'Connor will, even somebody like I'd say Paisani, given the certain chance, will throw that pass, and they've got lightning on the wings, and you saw that in Corbetti and
Corbett's finish was great. Both of them
brilliant finishes. So I think that from that perspective, I think they should absolutely be looking to shut down the outside and make the Wallabies do it on the inside, because their wingers are very dangerous.
And then rough up the likes of Phillip, who was so rambunctious, and Salakai Aloto, who's bigger than he was, but still probably a little light in terms of the second row engine room. You want him not roving in the wide channels, forced back in tight, and then smother them.
No question.
For sure. And then contrasting that with the Wallabies, what do the Wallabies want to do when they have the pill? We were kind of touching on it throughout. The main thing is hold it. We mentioned it last week. The biggest source of All Black tries is turnover and transition. So you've got to minimise those errors where you just cough up cheap ball. That has to be priorities 1, 2 and 3 if I'm Wallaby coach. You were mentioning Exeter. I would just sit them down and make them watch one Exeter try from this season where they went through maybe 10 or more phases, because just give them a bit of confidence that you can do that, retain the possession and put the All Blacks under pressure. Because they don't like defending.
Yeah, they don't put pressure on their defence, and they will give up errors, they will give up penalties. And like if I was Dave Rennie and I was putting a plan together for this week, and I think the ref is still to be confirmed, but if I had like a one message or one conversation that I could have with the ref pre-game, it would be, listen, watch these buggers on defence in their own 22, because I have video here of Sam Cane, not rolling away, grabbing onto the ball carrier for way too long, getting a cheeky hand in here and a cheeky hand in there. Can we just get clean defensive rugby from the All Blacks? And if they break the rules, can we please punish them? And if you do get that message to a ref, it can get through, and most of the time they're going to say, oh yeah, I see what you're talking about, and explain their position and say, listen, we will be looking out for that. So that would be the area that I would emphasise. And then, as you say, yes, put the defence under pressure, make them make those errors. And the All Blacks, they're very, very comfortable, all too comfortable, giving away cheap penalties at times in their own 22, and I think the Wallabies should be
making more and more tackles. They don't like soaking tackles at nauseum.
Exactly. So if the Wallabies can put that kind of pressure on them, I think that's definitely a good indicator for them.
Yeah, for sure. I think, by the way, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I think it's going to be Gardner this week.
Angus Gardner is. Oh, sorry, I didn't realise.
I think they mentioned that on commentary last week, because it was a Kiwi ref, and that was obviously getting the attention in last week's game because it was the first time since the 90s, and they were saying, well, for balance, I think it's going to be Angus Gardner next weekend. So that will obviously be good.
I'm not sure if that's confirmed.
I'm not sure if it's confirmed. I just mentioned that on commentary. It was Grant Nisbo let me know. Okay. But that would be a good message to get on, because obviously there were a few instances where they were flirting with the legality of that, and just if they can show a bit more composure. They showed themselves in the wet and the hard conditions away from home against the All Blacks, their big rivals. They showed themselves that they can do it. A brand new team, confidence is based on evidence, and they have a bucket load from that test. So they just need to build on that. As you say, try and execute a bit more through the multi-phase, and just really tire those All Blacks out. Have their way with them.
Another area of concern, I thought Nick White last week in the wind was excellent at box kicking. He's gonna have to be so again. Like, he's got to be ready, because if it was a big game last week for Nick White, it's a massive game this week. He's gotten all the plaudits, all the highlights. He put on, as Aaron Smith put it, an Aaron Smith-like clinic, caused them all kinds of bother. And his box kicking was lethal. But the All Blacks are going to be coming for him, I think, this week. They're going to try and rough him up, and then he's going to still be their main source of exit. So the loose kicks can't happen. Like if it's a less windy day, he's got to be on the money. If he's going to box kick, there's got to be a Wallaby winger right in the face of the ball of the receiver as soon as he gets it. You got to put them under pressure. You got to slow up that ball if you are giving the All Blacks back the ball, because if he kicks loosely, regardless of who the All Blacks go for, that is an avenue into the game for them, and they would only love for the Wallabies to make it easy for them.
Yeah.
And that is my fear for this week, is the Wallabies getting to, they got to a fever pitch last week. They're away in a tougher game this week, and the All Blacks are gunning for them. And if they're not at that fever pitch where they were last week in terms of intensity, in terms of focus and control of the pill, both ball in hand and with the boot, and they give the All Blacks easy access into their half, into attacking opportunities, it's going to be an easy day for the All Blacks, and that is exactly what they don't need.
No, exactly. So a bit of composure, but also be game for the fight. They need to be ready for the backlash that is inevitably going to come their way, and deal with that and move on. I also see you have here, which it's a bit early in Dave Rennie's tenure, but he was always some man for a strike play, and we nearly saw one with that Falau Faianga drop. That was the inside ball off the line out. It was clean until it was just dropped out of the blue. We'd like to see a few more of them from the Wallabies. New set piece strike plays.
There was all kinds of there were some clever shapes that the Wallabies were putting to it, and I'm just I don't know exactly what he's going to bring, but I'm excited to see what he brings. I mean, the Wallabies, there were a few occasions on multi-phase where they all broke to the open side, and the open side winger became a blind side winger, and they did as they sort of had been doing in the World Cup, sort of packing narrow channels. The All Blacks dealt with them, especially on the windy day. They couldn't quite execute. And as you say, there was that one with Corey Betty, I think it was,
who was on the inside ball.
Who was on the inside ball from Faianga.
Might have been Daugunu. Was it the left?
I thought it was on the left hand side.
It was Corey Betty.
It was Corey Betty who came off Faianga and would have perhaps fed Nick White in the corner, which would have been a very clever wee variation. Which the All Blacks executed for Aaron Smith's try. But I'm excited to see those. I'm excited to see what Dave Rennie does in terms of mixing it up and getting his lethal wingers on the ball in a bit of space off first phase. I definitely think that's something they'll be looking at and something to watch out for
sure. And then also just in terms of when they play without the ball, the Wallabies on defence, we were mentioning that as well as they played last week, they weren't truly tested in the way I expect them to be at Eden Park. So I think it's even a bigger focus on those young debutants in the back line. Obviously not debutants anymore, but it's an untested back line on either side of the ball, just because it's only one test deep. And I think they'll have to be ready for a bit more tempo in the game, probably slightly better conditions. It'll be a bit question mark as to how cohesive they are in the defensive line. For sure.
I think in terms of individual battles, they showed us a good example when they had the ball of besting the All Blacks' size advantage with good technique, support play, and footwork. And I think that and speed at times as well. And I think that they're going to have to combine all of that. Exactly the same on defence. I mean, that last sequence of play where the All Blacks were coming up the field, causing them huge problems. That's a bit of a concern. Like that's something that could put the fear of God into Wallabies going forward. And it might be something the All Blacks isolate and try to replicate. So you've got your big guys, your Satutus, your Tui Pilatus, your Artie Saveas, your Caleb Clarks. The Wallabies have to be very technical and make their tackles. They have to chop. They have to be quick. They have to get their body into the right position and make good, sharp, turf the man tackles. And you see a clinic of it from Sean Edwards, Wales, once upon a year. That's definitely an avenue, especially with the All Blacks playing slower. It's another case of the All Blacks can be very good and they might be too good. Who knows? But giving them easy avenues into the game by allowing their big runners to get around the corner and give Aaron Smith a perfect platform is absolutely not on the agenda. They have to be sharp, they have to get out of the line quickly and make a nice low tackle around the ankles and then get back up and play again.
For sure. Be patient with it. And then, obviously, be physical as you were last week and more.
We mentioned last week that Dave Rennie seems love the turnover as well, love to attack the breakdown.
As much as they need to limit those chances, they need to create them for themselves.
I think it's one battle, arguably, the Wallabies lost last week was the Battle of the Sevens. Sam Cane was much more impactful in the game than Hooper was, although Hooper did have some nice touches.
He did have a big steal at one point.
I would like to see him get in there and cause cause
more problems.
I also think Tupou, because Tupou is such a versatile, like if he's starting and if he's in, he's such a versatile, brilliant, energetic player, and he's got such a wonderful body. I think he actually has potentially the shape and the strength to be a lethal weapon on poach, like an old Stefan Armitage, like if he gets over the ball,
or just
who's
like
moving
a few
him.
of the modern tight heads. Andrew Porter's good for it in from Leinster colours, but there are a few tight heads now who've made that a big part of their game. Hookers and tight heads as well as sevens. Tupou is obviously a young lad, so it'd be good to mould him as a big defensive asset as well as a barnstorming attacking one for sure. But yeah, it's very, very exciting. I don't know what more to say really.
Well, just take a quick look at the set piece as well. Yeah. In terms of the set piece, I don't expect it to be a massive indicator, especially from a Wallabies point of view. They were like, I cited as an example, and it was perhaps towards the end of the Cheika era of somewhere where they could get an edge on the All Blacks. But as it played out, the engine room difference was too great for them to really get anything going at scrum time.
Yeah.
The scrums are not always solidly reffed over in New Zealand anyway, so if they can achieve some kind of parity there, I think they're just going to move on. I don't think there really is much scope, unless Joe Moody has a shocker and Tupou has him in huge trouble.
But then conversely, you have Slipper on your own team. They're like,
Slipper,
not the most dynamic. He played very well. But he's not like an aggressive scrummager. I don't think either of them have been scrummaging that aggressively for penalties. It's just not really in their blood.
And then likewise the line-out drive. The line-out was a mess for Australia. That's something they'll definitely have to fix.
Obviously.
And as a consequence, they never really got a maul going, and we never saw how organised they were in that department. But again, the size advantage would suggest that they should be moving the ball.
They did set it up once or twice and just got stopped. Yeah. So maybe that's an issue. But the Brumbies, as we had cited, obviously have a very dynamic maul that they go to a lot. It would just it starts with getting that first phase ball accurate and correct, because the All Blacks will look to continue what they were doing last week, because their line out looked like a polished gem.
Yeah, it was very good, and I wonder if they might try and attack it. Like, it's something, especially if they're not going to be wide and they're not going to be as creative, but they're just going to look to physically impose themselves. It's an area where it could be a serious penalty generator for them. It was last week. The Wallabies were very sloppy in the defensive maul. They were getting around the corner, so they might go back to the mauls and they might try to attack the scrum, especially with that really strong back five that they have, really, no matter who they pick. So the set piece could be an area of interest, depending on whether or not the All Blacks decide to attack it and how Australia do cope with that, if that is the case. But in terms of how it's going to go, do you have a prediction?
We said the All Blacks last week, but we weren't going to really we weren't pushing the boat out too much to call an All Blacks home win. I do think it's going to be an All Blacks home win. In Eden Park, you don't get very far betting against it. But I'd expect it to be close again. I'm hoping for another humdinger of a game and a one-score game at the end, because that grandstand finish is exactly what we all want in international rugby, and a competitive Wallabies, which is the really great news from Bledisloe 1. That's exactly what the world needs, to be honest. We need Bledisloe to be played to a top quality level, which it was. So I'm just hoping for more of the same. I expect the All Blacks to win it, though.
Yeah, it's a curious one. I mean, we outlined, I think, as comprehensively as we can, the winning conditions for both teams, and there are wins out there for both teams. By no means undecided. I think the Wallabies can cause the All Blacks huge problems. I think they showed that. I think the All Blacks are a little out of sorts, frankly
disjointed in terms of their 3-quarter line. As we were saying, there's still question marks all over there.
Problems not fixed all over the park, and I think that is a problem. But almost what swayed me is that sort of the chat from the Wallabies and the chat from the All Blacks after this game, and sort of the level. I don't think that the All Blacks can afford in their own minds not to be at fever pitch when the game in Eden Park rolls around, with potentially a full crowd, for the first time since the pandemic, after last week's sort of ignominious result, and some chat from Wallaby media, from Australian media as well.
Always good to stoke the fire, motivational flame.
I just think they're going to be at the pitch, and I think if Australia are at the pitch as well, we're in for another cracker, and I think the All Blacks will edge it. I think they're just that little bit sharper, perhaps that little bit more physical, and will just edge it that way. The Wallabies not yet having sort of that clinical edge to really punish them with loads of tries. And I think if the Wallabies aren't at that fever pitch, it could be brutal, because every drop will be punished with a try. And
that is the fear. We don't know how this Aussie team does as far as consistency, because we haven't seen it. We've only seen one test, but that is the question mark now. Can you get up the week after a tremendous performance? Something we always have problems with Ireland a lot of the time. It's very tough to do in international rugby.
Any sport,
to be honest,
you see it
you're
all the
away
time
from home. So hopefully the energy levels are at fever pitch for both, and then we can just see some more beautiful rugby.
Honestly, my suspicion is All Blacks by 20 plus, but let's hope not.
Let's hope one score. I'm going with one score game.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. With that, we move on to our next segment where we change hemispheres, not quite change codes, but obviously it's club rugby instead of international rugby. Any other weekend, this would be the headline all over Europe, all over the rugby world, but circumstances being the case, it isn't. But we obviously have two finals, Champions Cup and Challenge Cup. Two exciting games with two exciting teams, and I suppose first we're going to start with the more illustrious of the competitions, which is the Champions Cup. And with that, we have two fantastic teams. First-time winners. It'll definitely be a first-time winner coming out of this game. We have Exeter Chiefs versus Racing 92.
Yeah, it's an exciting one, isn't it? I mean, as you say, any other week, I can't have envisaged doing this podcast a potential week where there's a European final and it doesn't top the billing.
Yeah.
It's strange times when that stuff is going on. But yeah, this is, I mean, you want to talk about salivating at the mouth ahead of a rugby weekend. We have two European finals, but a Champions Cup final as well as a Bledisloe game. It's not often you see that, and it's very, very exciting. I mean, two new faces in many ways. As Leinster fans, we've had our egos bruised. It's one thing to lose, it's another thing to lose to a team that goes on to lose.
Yes.
Where does that leave you?
Yeah.
Leinster don't feature, Saracens don't feature, none of Toulouse don't feature. It's new blood and new teams, but I think on the whole it is the best two teams in Europe this year. It's probably the most clinical and what is the word I'm looking for? A sort of ruthless team in Exeter who brutalise their opponents with such efficiency. And then it's against sort of the flairist, the team with flair and sexy rugby, who are also just brilliant. They're brilliant attacking team that are playing offensive rugby to a standard not played anywhere else in Europe. I mean, there's a few teams trying. Toulouse are getting close at times. Clermont.
Toulouse kind of stagnated a little in terms of their development this year. They weren't necessarily that much of a better team than they were last year.
They went all in on Entomac at 10.
Yeah, he's a bit of a passenger in that team sometimes, but. No, these two teams have just been steadily improving over the last few years. Like Racing were in the final against us a few years back as well. And
they've lost two finals.
They have lost two finals. Obviously, that's not good. Well, it serves them in some prep, but it is obviously disappointing. Exeter have yet to make it this far in this competition without getting the hokey chokies. They both as teams just been building with completely different ethoses, like very different styles, but have been building teams very steadily and patiently, which is the way to go in rugby. We've seen big rich guys come in and buy a load of players and you expect to assemble a hodgepodge team of mercenaries. It doesn't tend to work. You can see a lot of examples of that in the Premiership and Tom Couture's of kind of project teams that don't work, but both of these teams have really been thereabouts for the last few years.
There's a drive in both of them. In Exeter it's very much sort of there's almost a chip on their shoulder, but they got promoted I want to say 10-15 years ago now. They've been slowly building ever since, and they've developed a very good club ethos, a very tight-knit group. They really believe in one another. They've recruited very smartly, especially in recent seasons, expanded out their game, so they have actually a lot of talent in the team now, as well as a raw physicality and a comfort in what they're doing, and an ability just game after game to break and weary their opponents and end up owning the game
on top by the last two quarters.
And they're a team who've had obviously the Saracens chip on their shoulders. They feel they should have won more, and there's that sort of real drive now that Saracens they've been vindicated in their hatred of Saracens, and now this is the year that we show everyone where we should have been the whole time, which is the best team in Europe, perhaps the best team of England. They're standing on the precipice of doing a double. And then you pivot across to Racing, where you think things might be a little more free flowing. The owning group at Racing are, and you've heard sort of Simon Zebo say this in interviews and others, they are determined to win. They're like very, very almost fuming and disappointed that they haven't won anything. They have two big posters apparently up in the training room, one of the Bouclier and one of the Champions Cup, and I think they really want that star on their jersey as well, and they want to be a club that is considered
one of the greats.
Yeah, one of the greats, and a club of stature.
Whoever wins it will be the 12th different club. Only the 12th to win the European Championship. So
the end are a pretty exclusive club in Europe, and it's a great stepping stone and a milestone you have to cross if you want to be a great team.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a real anxiety in Racing to win major silverware. A European Cup would be the pinnacle, and then in Exeter as well. Frankly, I thought they wanted to win the Premiership this year. The fact that they've been able to barnstorm through Europe, they've made such a step up, and they look the best team in Europe. Is more power, more credit to them. I'm not even sure if they expected to have had such a leap in terms of their European pedigree from a side that couldn't get out of the pool to a side that looks unbeatable.
They were a side last year that probably should have got out of the pool.
Of course,
they kind of pulled the hokey chokey and got turned around, which was unfortunate. But they seem to mean business. Rob Baxter has been a stalwart there, and they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and they're sticking to their processes, and it's yielding dividends. They were comprehensively better than Toulouse in the semi-finals, and it shows good credence to being well coached. And then things like you were mentioning, recruiting in the right areas. Like they were a little less dynamic out wide than they ought to have been last season. They got Stewie Hogg in. That's kind of changed now. Slade, obviously a big fulcrum for them as well. They've expanded without losing their identity and their massive forward pack and their good fundamentals. They just added strings to their bow rather than kind of ripping up the script and starting again. They've not done that.
No, they've done a very impressive job from Rob Baxter in terms of the slow build.
Yeah.
And while at times it's not the prettiest picture, I'm sure sort of the casual fan might be leaning to Racing, who've definitely put on the better show.
Sexier rugby for sure.
But in terms of raw efficiency, they're rated one of the top sides, and they're up there with Crusaders in terms of just their ability to score tries. And one of the things that's so great about Exeter is that they don't take the 3 points when I'm listen, there's times to take 3 points, etc. It's one of those ongoing debates, and we sort of take a stance that there's no such thing as 3 free points. There are 3 points that come at the expense of ending your attack and ending your territory advantage and ending your pressure, your possession advantage, and relieving the pressure that you've put onto your opponents. And Exeter are a great side for not doing that. They don't bite in. Like we saw at Saracens against Racing, we'll get into that as well in the semi-final. Should have won the game. They were on top. Racing were sloppy. Racing weren't quite themselves. And Saracens had a good plan to contain their offence, did for the most part, and probed with their kicks and set up nice attacking platforms. Racing gave away penalties, and Saracens took 3 points. And as a result, they never got far enough away. Racing were able to stay in touch long enough to click for one play, and that was all she wrote. Exeter, by contrast, do not release the pressure well. If they get into your 22 and they get a penalty, if they're a little far out, they'll go to the corner. If they get one from the corner, they just tap and go. They're so there's such a level of trust in themselves to retain the ball and to break down the defence ultimately by being patient. And they're ruthless at doing that. And the stats back them up. Their capacity to score tries when they get in the red zone is unparalleled in the competition. And so that's something that Racing will have to worry about.
For sure, yeah. No, just looking at a few of those stats in terms of the colour of the game as well. Obviously, the game's taking place on Saturday. We mentioned, didn't mention at the top, but 4:45 BST, Ashton Gate in Bristol, which is an unusual location.
That's actually, it's a little, from sort of a colour perspective, it's a little deflating.
It's a 27,000 seater is Ashton Gate.
It's in a small stadium with no fans, so there's probably it's just a club ground as well. It's Ashton Gate in Bristol, which we're used to seeing every week in the Premiership. So it loses a bit of the sort of gravitas and the colour that the Champions Cup final can and does bring. I mean,
far cry from St James's.
I was in St James's Park last year, and one of the great things about Champions Cup finals always is they're just magnificent to experience as a fan. You have fans from clubs all over Europe. It's a bit of a tradition. You buy your tickets at the start of the season and you go wearing your club colours regardless of where you came. You get Benetton fans and Toulouse fans and Leicester fans all mixing and having a good time, and obviously that dynamic, that beautiful fan dynamic that makes the competition so special, will be missing. So just from that point of view, it's a little sad.
For sure. But then on the positive side, Nigel Owens is reffing the contest, which we always love to see. You go on, Nige. And there's probably a chance of some light winds and some light rain, but nothing too major as far as affecting the conditions. But then just looking through a few of those stats, because you were mentioning some of them, in terms of Exeter have scored 7 tries from tap and goes this season. That's the most of any team in the competition. And by contrast, Racing have scored 7 kick return tries, the most of anyone in the competition, which is a little illustration of the differences between the sides. Sam Simmons, the number 8 for Exeter, is the top try scorer in the tournament, also 7 with 7 tries. A lot of pick and jamming going on there. And then Finn Russell has the most assists, also with 7. The rule of 7 going on. But it just shows that some of those stats kind of reveal just the different ways that the teams are approaching attacking. Vakatawa has beaten 48 defenders, the most of anyone in the competition. 19 more than Noel, Larmer and Ludlam, who are tied in second. So Vakatawa in the 13 shirt, obviously devastating. And Joe Simmons, the kicker for Exeter, has the best kicking percentage stats in terms of the whole comp. He is 94%, 34 kicks from 36. And that kind of goes to your point that they won't take on the marginal penalties. They'll kick to the corner. If a penalty comes that is under the post, sometimes they will kick it, but more often those are conversions from under the post, because they'll pick and jam and they'll work towards the post, so a lot of their conversions are easy. Now, not to diminish what is an impeccable or close to impeccable kicking stat, but that is symptomatic.
He's not taking kicks from the halfway line.
He's not pot shotting a lot of the time because they want
because their picture is setting up stall in their opponent's half, buckling them and getting the score then.
Absolutely.
Often with a yellow card in tow, etc. So that is interesting. In terms of the squad news in the two teams, Racing are coming into the game with a pretty settled side. You got Benaroo in there with Camille Shai. You got I think Dominic Bird and one of Bernard LaRue or Donica Ryan, who I think if Donica Ryan's fit, I think they will go with him. You got Sankani, you got Klassen in there. You've obviously got Eira Beren and Finn Russell at halfback.
Laurie as well, isn't he?
Laurie in the back row as well. Laurie in there. Eira Beren and Finn in halfback. I expect Klemenchak and Vakatawa to continue in the centre. And then the sort of question mark is in the back three. They have a couple of concerns in the back three. They, first of all, like where they started the season, they had, I think it was Imov, Toma and Toulon. That's what they played most of the pool games in, and they were the most clinical back three around. We know Imov and Teddy Toma are so good on the ball, and
Toulon's a lovely assured presence as well. He is missed. He's been nowhere since lockdown, which is unfortunate.
So they had an excellent back three that was scoring tries, and then sort of as the tournament's gone on, it's got madder and madder, and Toulon got a long-term injury. Teddy Toma has been out injured. Imov was out briefly injured as well. And then they got Curtly Beale in to cover for Brice Toulon, and then Curtly Beale went and got himself a red card, and he hasn't really emerged since. But I think he might be back. I'm trying to find out, but I'm not sure. But what they went with in the semi-final was Zebo at fullback, and Zebo didn't have a good game. He doesn't bring what those guys can bring from an offensive point of view. He's not the clinical finisher. He's sort of a fill-in player a little bit. Like, he has his moments. He can certainly catch and pass without any issue. He has a decent boot on him, but he doesn't really bring anything special or anything extra that those guys bring.
No, for sure.
So
and as such, they've been a little bit stagnated compared to their flowy pool stage form. For sure, they weren't as flowy in that Sarries game.
I think Imov and Toma are back, which is great for them, and if they can get those guys in, and if those guys are right, that'll be massive. And then the question mark is whether they persist with Zebo or whether they can get Curtly Beale back in, whether there's that level of trust there.
Well, there's a question of like, do you stick with Zebo because he's been with the side, obviously, or do you throw Beale in for what is, despite all the weird circumstances and the odd time of year, it is a European final. It's the Champions Cup final.
I don't doubt that Curtly Beale is a better player than Simon Zebo, comfortably a better player than Simon Zebo. But when he came in, he gave that red card, and he's temperamental sod at the best of times. The question from a coach's point of view always has to be, is he in the right frame of mind? And that said, like, it's not like Zebo was rock solid either. He gave away a couple of on a couple of occasions in the semi-final against Saracens. He coughed up the ball in his own 22 and gave Saracens a scrum in their 22, which is such a no-no against Exeter.
That's exactly what you can't be doing, for sure. So, like, whoever's in that back three, it's a big job to diffuse some of those bombs and get them exiting nice and cleanly. But then on the Exeter side, Exeter just today actually, but they got the all clear COVID wise. They all got tested, and there's apparently no COVID in the club, which is good to hear
from an English club.
From an English club, exactly. So there's no issue there. It seems like all of them will be available. We don't know about Jack Null. He probably is going to miss out if the rumour mill is to be believed, which is unfortunate because it's a final and he's one of their box office players. But in O'Flaherty and Woodburn and Hogg, that has been their back three in the Premiership, and that is a pretty attacking back three.
Again, themselves, they managed to, despite the numerous options available to them, they've managed to arrive at a nice settled team.
Yeah,
I think they have Slade in at 13. That's not going to change. Joe Simmons has taken over the 10 shirt. He's in there. That's pretty much decided.
Yeah.
There's a little question mark at 12 as to whether they go with Devoto or Whitten.
Devoto. They've kind of rotated the two of them. I'm not sure who they'll favour in the final. It was Whitten in the semi-final.
Yes.
But he was brilliant.
Devoto played the semi-final last week.
Yes.
So it's curious. You don't even know who the incumbent is. And they've obviously got the little lad Jack Monder at 9.
Yes.
And their pack is where they really get it done. They've got 6 really class props. But they're even settled in how they start. But that tight 5 of Hepburn, Cowan-Dickey, Harry Williams, Johnny Gray, and Johnny Hill and Johnny Gray.
Yes.
2
Johnnies.
That is huge. And then even Sam Simmons, top try scorer in the comp.
Ewells is
yes,
in the back row. Ewells who converted lock as well. They have a lot of line-out options and just a lot of heft. They're a big, physical, well-drilled pack.
Yeah.
And their number 8's the top try scorer in the tournament. It shows exactly what they know what they're doing and they know how to do it.
Yeah.
So as far as the squads, they're pretty settled. For sure.
Yeah.
And then just in terms of getting into the game, we'll look again at the winning conditions and what both sides will be looking to get out of it from either side of the ball. So we'll start with Racing, the French club. It was meant to be in Marseille, sure, it would have been the home team in another world. But what do Racing want to do when they have the ball? And we were looking at this all throughout the season. Obviously, Finn and Iribarin, the halfbacks, are vital to their tempo and to their strategy because Exeter are not a team that you want to take on in the tight. You want to try and kind of circumvent that a little bit and make it about something else. And they have in Iribarin and Finn Russell, that is, 2 of the best playmakers around in terms of setting that tempo and picking those brilliant passes. And if you have Vakatawa in that kind of form where he's beaten 60 odd tacklers in a tournament, you can feed a lot of those danger men out wide for sure.
I think Exeter have a good defence. They're very physical without having an exceptional defence in terms of guys like O'Flaherty on the wing. You feel like they could be tested more, and he's by no means a bad defender. Racing have elite attackers, especially if they've Toma and Imov on the pitch, and Vakatawa as just an insane beater of defenders, and Finn Russell as an insane distributor. The path is pretty easy. I mean, they're almost All Black-like in the sense that their attack is very instinctual. Mike Prendergast, the attack coach, understands the talent he has, and it's all about sort of getting those guys reading the game right and then executing the plays. Finn Russell is one of the great readers of defences, and he's an absolute puzzle to solve because defenders don't know what he's going to do. He usually has a few options, and he usually has just a great read of what the defenders are thinking. So if someone like Slade bites up, if they're too narrow, he'll go either over the top or over to the crossfield kick. If they go too short, he'll hold the ball, he'll shape like he's throwing a long ball, and Slade might bite, and then he'll just give the short ball. And then move around the corner again, and whoever he gives it to, be it Claessens or Vakatawa or Klemenchak, the tempo that they can play with, they're all very difficult guys to tackle. They get go for a ball, he has the ball again, he has you in the same bind, only with more space. That's sort of the flowy picture that Racing are trying to paint.
For sure. And if Vakatawa at the 13 channel can impose himself the way he's imposed himself throughout the competition, if he can make Slade second guess himself and also have to bite down on him because he's dominating the collision zone, so then you can create more space out wide, that'll be the picture they want to paint. Certainly for Finn, it's on him, his burden of responsibility to kind of marshal what the backline's doing. But Iribarin, who I am a huge fan of, he's been very impressive for years. His job will be obviously just mixing it up. The forward carriers will have to carry around the fringes, even though you don't want to make the game about that. So you need to try and, when you're playing off 9, mix up the length of the passes, have multiple options, a few out to try and fold the defence. But also one area of weakness that in the Exeter defence that I've noticed throughout the whole season, Toulouse exposed it for one of the tries they scored, is the short side. I was very excited for the prospect of Leinster taking on Exeter if they had made it that far, because I think Leinster are good at flooding short side. I think French sides in general understand how to flood small channels with lots of numbers. I think there is space against Exeter on the short side, and it's on Iribarin to spot it, because Finn's obviously going to be on the open side. So if he can, there will be moments in the match if they can get that quick ball where the short side's available. It would be nice to see them click and go for it.
Exactly, anything they can get there, boys. Like if it's Teddy Thomas or Imhoff, all they'll need is open field, and if you can put them in the open field with the ball, chances are, like as good as Stuart Hogg is, like he could be done by them easily. They're such elite attackers. That's such a weapon that Racing have. I mean, one of the things that like has to be considered, this is the area that is Racing's strength, their offense. This is where they've made their name, and it took them 75 minutes to score a try against Saracens. I mean, they got out of jail. It was a magnificent play. It was a lovely read from Finn Russell, beautifully executed chip. I mean, you've seen it so often. He's such a lovely attacking player. Vakatawa, beautiful link-up work, Finn again, and Imhoff, and then try. And it was a gorgeous try, but it took them 75 minutes. And I guarantee if it takes them 75 minutes to score a try this week, they will not win the game. No way, no how. Exeter are too clinical, and they'll get their opportunities and they'll take them. And in terms of what happened in the Toulouse game, that was sort of the picture. I mean, Toulouse had all the possession in the first half. They took a 6-point lead. Then Exeter got one drive, 7-6. That is brutal. It's like a different form of all-blacking a team, and that is something that Racing are going to have to be conscious of, because Exeter, they're so clinical and they're so physical that they just put the pressure on you. They can keep the pressure valve on you with one opportunity for ages, and they come away with a try. So if Racing aren't clinical in response, the game will get away from them. Racing need to flip the script on Exeter by putting scoreboard pressure on them, by flipping it around and putting the pressure on them. If they can get early scores, if they can get a 10 or 14 point lead, I think that would be massive in terms of moving the pressure from themselves to Exeter. So I think like they would want to back their technical ability on exits very well if they're going to take 3-pointers. And I actually don't think that's a strength of theirs. I think they're a little loose in the backfield. I think their kicking game is at times a little loose. I think when they have the ball for too long in their own half, they're liable to make errors and give Exeter ins. So I think if they go about the game the way that Toulouse went about the game, which is owning the ball, causing some things, and trying to build slow scoreboard pressure. We have a penalty here, we'll kick 3, slow scoreboard pressure. It's very top couture's, although Racing do tend to break the mould.
They do.
I think that if Exeter are going to be going for tries, I know I'm a broken record saying this, Racing need to be going for tries, and I don't think that 3 points, I think like a 6-point lead for Racing could be doom unless they're very, very technical on exits and very, very good defensively and manage to control the game, which I don't think is their game. I think they need to start the game like lightning, and I think they need to punish Exeter every time they get up into Exeter's 22 with speed and tries.
Well, one criticism you'd have of Exeter, even though they have been very efficient, is that they go through a lot of phases before getting their try. They're quite slow to get their scores, even though they can be clinical with getting them. So paint the picture we haven't seen. The Exeter are the unbeaten team remaining. They're 7-0-1 this season.
They had a draw against Glasgow.
They had a draw against Glasgow.
Which Stuart Hogg missed a kick to win it, if you recall.
I do remember that now. He's obviously switched.
No, he missed a kick in Exeter.
Oh, sorry, in Exeter.
Glasgow.
That's right. So they're unbeaten. One bit of colour as well is like if they do win the game, it'll be the 5th year in a row that an unbeaten side has been champion, which is quite unusual because it used to be unusual.
It never happened until I guess
it might have been a few years ago, but if it happens this year, it's 5 in a row, which is curious.
Wow.
Didn't
realise that.
Just in terms of their defence, or sorry, when they use the ball, they need to, as you say, punish Exeter very quickly with their clinical striking in the first half, and paint that picture of like get 2 scores ahead of them, get on top of them in the first half, and force Exeter to chase a game, which we haven't seen all season.
And be quicker in what they do, and see if you can cause them to panic.
Especially the only time we've seen them lose, they lost to London Irish recently in their A side, but pre-lockdown, the one side that did it to them was Gloucester, with a similar kind of motif where our pack are probably a little outmatched here. So we're going to move the point of contact. We're going to trust Cipriani, our baller distributing 10, to make the plays and try and grab tries, take a lead, and put the pressure on.
Racing are very much a better version of that. Like they have Rhys Sammet and Thorley on the wings, and then they have Finn Russell as distributor. It's just an upgrade.
Gloucester.
Cipriani, Rhys Sammet, and Thorley versus Finn Russell, Teddy Thomas and Imhoff is just like an upgraded version of Gloucester.
And sure, if you're putting Donnacha Ryan's heft, I think they should pick Donnacha Ryan. It goes back to squad again, but he really does change the workload that pack get through. They are a little soft without him, and the fear is to be a little bit soft against this Exeter team. You can't afford that on D, but for sure they need to try and make it a game that Exeter have to chase, and that suits Racing down to the ground, because then they're more like, if you get an impatient Exeter or an Exeter in cup final mode who are nervous, then pouncing on the counter attack, because like everything else with it that is to do with attack, just looking at Racing with the ball, their turnover and transition game can be fantastic because they have such lightning there.
Well, they have all of the tools. They have a magnificent strike runner and distributor, offloader in Vakatawa, a defender beater, a creator.
Yeah.
And they have a distributing creator in Finn Russell, a guy who can put people in space, who has endless vision.
Yeah.
And they have lethal finishers.
Yeah.
So they have as elite attack as there is in Europe, and if there is a way to get through Exeter, I would expect them to try and do it. Now, one of the other factor that we haven't discussed is the conditions. I mean, we were hoping that it wasn't going to be too bad in terms of the conditions, but obviously that's 10-day forecast. It's middle of October. You were in, Bristol in England. It's not exactly, the south of France.
Yes,
so
there's potential for a rainy day.
Yeah,
which suits Exeter.
That would absolutely tip the scales in Exeter's favour. And if it is lashing rain, Racing have to execute all that harder. They have to, the capacity to get around teams
diminishes greatly. It would diminish the impact of the likes of Vakatawa or the likes of Teddy Thomas or any of these
become
guys.
More of a game for your Camille Shaz and your
Wenceslas Laures and all of these guys need to be working hard.
That's one of those uncontrollable factors that's going to tip the scale perhaps one way or the other.
Yeah.
But certainly if that is the adjustment, you're still backing your halfbacks to guide you around the pitch, and you're still backing your attack to finish just from those narrower starting points, I would say.
Well, certainly on D, Racing will have that big job anyway, regardless of conditions, because they knowing what Exeter are going to do is one thing. Every team that goes into it knows what they're going to do, but so few of them stop it, and particularly in Ashton Gate, it's a stomping ground for just standard Premiership rugby fairs, and Exeter tend to win those. And certainly, if Racing are a bit tame on their 3-point, if the scoreboard pressure isn't a lot, if they aren't converting much, they will struggle. But in terms of defence, it's a huge job for the whole pack. Bird and Ryan, or LaRue, depending on who's in the engine room, Laurie and Klassen will all have to up their workload. I know Klassen's very old now, but he is a kind of a workhorse moulded player. Even Benarou and Henry Colum, the tight head, will need to make their share of dominant hits. The whole pack will need to make their share of driving back hits, because Exeter, when they just get that head of steam up, they're impossible to stop. You need to drive them back. And I think primary steal job has to be Camille Shah. I think he is their best defensive asset by quite a distance. He is a phenomenon over the ball. Very tough to move, very industrious. Obviously opposite him is Luke Cowan-Dickey. They're two elite international caliber twos. But for Racing, they need to generate some of those turnovers, not just to strike off, but in terms of D, if they can release that pressure valve in the 22, if they can stop that formidable Exeter multi-phase and escape the red zone without Exeter scoring, that's a big, it's a cup final rugby. All of those moments count so much. That'll be big seismic ones. If you can get one or two big steals in the first half, that
would be massive. If they could stop Exeter painting their picture in the 22, that would be massive. I think certainly plan A needs to be to limit those opportunities, and one of the ways you do that is not by giving them not allowing them to have easy access when they do have the ball a little deeper in the field. So that's where Exeter like to move it around a little bit, and they'll try and access the wide channels. They'll try and catch drift defences and just exploit drift, get the defence drifting, and then just take the extra meters. Move it from left to right, then move it from right to left. Catch the drift, and all of a sudden they're up on the 22, and bingo, we can paint our picture.
Exactly.
That's very much Exeter's mold. So I think in the centres, it's a big job for Klemenchak and Vakatawa. And Vakatawa has been dodged at times. He's shot out of line, but he's been dodged in a kind of way that Toulouse might exploit more than Exeter. But if he can get up, if both of them can get up, not concede soft meters, and not allow Exeter to get the ball so wide that their wingers have it in that middle of the field, it'll just limit and force them to take a lot longer to get it up the field and into the 22. And if they can also limit sort of dominant carries around the fringes, make good tackles, get out of the line nicely, sharply, they could just pin Exeter back. And if Exeter are pinned back even to the opposition 10 metre line for 5 or 6 phases, they will set up their caterpillar ruck and
kick.
And then you have to deal with the kicks.
Yes, that's its own picture on D. The back three, no matter who they pick, will have to be tight on those. Yes. They can be loose. Exeter will target them. Exeter have a varied kicking game. They know this. With Slade and Hogg, you have 2 left footers. You also have the 2 halfbacks as well. 4 very good kicking options to exploit you. They need to be alive to it in the backfield. And then as far as leading the line, I think it's on Klemenchak. He needs to do his best little Henry Chavancy impression and get up out of the line hard and fast in that 12 channel to shut out the potential space for Slade out wide, because Slade for them is the key to the outside channels, and it kind of starts inside him, and as far as stopping his ability to access them and to bring their back three into the play, which they'll only really endeavour to do in the middle of the park generally. They have shown a willingness and more of a recognition this season, whereas it was a criticism last season that they would just relentlessly in the 22 just pick and jam all the time. They have scored a few tries where they pick and jam. Oh, it is out wide, and they will. The wingers will be on hand to dot that down, and it is usually Slade who is the link man in that. So they will try and do that only if they've generally earned the right to go wide. It is preceded by the pick and jam game. So they just individually to a man, they need to be up for those physical just collision zone. They need to be game for it, and then a few guys like Klemenchak in the 12 shirt and the back row in general, they all need to bring and bring physicality and line speed.
Camille Shah, who's their secret weapon, he is one of their best players, especially in the forward pack. He is their best player, and he can be elite. So he can have a game where he absolutely tortures an opposition pack, and he gets in over the ball, and he makes dominant carries both sides of the ball. So that would be massive for them as well. But and then just dealing with the kicks, if they can deal with the kicks, not make errors, not give Exeter the easy in. I mean, we mentioned how they did that against Saracens and weren't punished.
Yeah, for sure.
They will be if they aren't tied under the high ball, because that is massive, and I think that's a huge point of emphasis for how the game will go.
For sure. And then the other one is set piece, because I was just thinking Henry Colombe has been mightily impressive and tight as a young tight head this year, but he will have a serious job against one of the more aggressive scrummaging packs in the whole tournament at scrum time, and it will pretty much be on him to lock that down. Racing will be looking for parity, will be looking to move the ball away from the set piece through their quick halfbacks, but it all starts at the rocket tight head, he will be under pressure.
It does, and the hooking of Shah, I mean, in terms of having their own possession, the ball does need to be quick hook and at the base. That's crucial. And then I would have confidence in Benaroux and even Colombe to not be, ball in instantly backwards, sort of that chaos picture. I don't think that Racing will paint that. But what will happen is that the sheer heft that Exeter have going on with their 3 second rows and their Vermeulen and Simmons as a back five is absolutely massive, as well as their humongous props. The amount of weight that's going to be coming through on Racing is colossal. So ultimately I think Exeter will start marching forward, and it's on Racing when Exeter have it to lock it down long enough that the ref tells them to use it, and when they have it just to get it in and get it out. So the scrum very much one way, but if Racing can achieve parity, they'll be happy with that.
For sure. And actually with the line out, I was just looking at statistically, they both have pretty excellent line outs, to be honest, no matter who they pick. We were mentioning the 2 hookers, Camille Schatt and Cowan Dickey, are pretty much world class operators, so I don't really have a doubt that barring a drastic kind of underperformance from one or the other of them, or a major system malfunction, I think they'll be pretty clean on their line out, because the other factor is they don't really have line out poachers in their team. That's not really their game. They don't tend to jump to compete, and neither of them really maul either. Like Exeter do set up a maul sometimes, but they'll more often tap and go through the multi-phase carry game. So I expect just the set pieces, they're looking for clean opportunities to shift it wider. For Racing in particular, it's the onus is on them to get clean, quick ball off their set piece and not cough up, particularly at scrum time, cheap penalties. If there's a scrum in the middle of the pitch, that should be, if you can lock it down and force Exeter to go through their multi-phase, they might end up kicking it to you if you can defend accurately. If you, at source, give away a penalty, they're straight into the corner, they're winning that line out, and that's the picture they want to paint.
And likewise, on the other side of the ball, I mean, the scrum is one of those, scrum and line out, I mean, I think they should be calling 7-man line outs and really trying to get as many one-on-one matchups back-to-back as possible is huge.
Yeah.
And getting that precious bit of clean ball where it's your back line versus their back line and they've no back rowers in the back line, the pack is all in one place.
Yeah.
That is one of those precious pictures that they're going to need to exploit if they're going to win the game.
And also, like, scrums are one where that is possible. If Henry Colum can lock it down, then it's a great opportunity for them to attack in exactly that way. You can have two sides of the scrum, you can have one-on-one matchups. Vakatawa has been beating defenders left, right and centre. If he can occupy Slade, shut them down, fold the defence, that's obviously a good picture for Racing. But then for Exeter, with them involved, we've kind of touched on it throughout, there's no surprises. We all kind of know what to expect from them with the ball in hand. It's a very physical game. It involves big forwards carrying hard into the contact and really kind of breaking their opponents, backing their fitness and physicality to get them over the line. Even if if they're slow at the start, they just keep themselves in touch. Keep the scoreboard ticking over enough to be in striking distance and then back themselves to score at the end. One of the interesting stats actually is that Exeter have scored the most tries in the third quarter of any team with I think 13 and Racing have scored the most tries in the second quarter, so just either side of half time
championship minutes.
So they are two champion sides, but Exeter will be looking to back themselves as the fitter side, apply the pressure, and really physicalise, as we say, the Racing guys.
We've outlined what the game is. I mean, they want to move Racing from side to side when they have the ball in their half, but not quite at their 22. You know, get them drifting, maybe get Vakatawa exposed a little bit. Get over the gain line. O'Flaherty is a very deceptive runner when he does get over the gain line. Noel obviously likewise, and Hogg obviously. Noel might not be there, but they would back themselves in those outside channels to cause Racing a bit of pressure, get them going backwards, get them trying to sort of absorb the hit and then moving it again down through the middle, nice and simple, no fancy offloads, but getting their men in a bit of space, getting the defence retreating, and then working their way to the opposition 22, where everything does tighten up and everything is about just getting on top of them physically. And it's a very simple game plan. It is yet to be beaten in a big game this season. And I think they'll be very confident. I don't think they'll be changing much about what the picture is. They're obviously kicking from their own half.
This is it. Well, from their own half, from the middle third, really, they'll probe, as you say, side to side, kind of test the fringes. But then, if they've managed to pull any wingers up or something, they will drop it on the toe. They will try and find a touch finder in the opposition 22 and force Racing to exit, because with every exit brings its opportunity for them to mess it up, cough up a chief turnover from a drop ball or from a technical penalty or infringement.
Saracens painted the picture against Racing. They defended them well, and then they put them under huge pressure with nice little attacking kicks. They had loads of them. Racing's back three did not deal with it, and then they got scrums in the 22, and it's really on Saracens that they didn't make more of those opportunities than they should have. But Exeter, I think, would fancy themselves to do that if they can do that. So absolutely, I think Simmons, I think Slade, I think Hogg will all be putting nice probing balls in behind, whether it's Zebo or whether it's Beale or whoever it is. They're going to fancy themselves, especially with a good kick chase, and if it's a wet turf, you know, they will fancy themselves to get on top of that back three and get them turning backwards instead of being lethal finishers.
Put the pressure on them. You make them defend rather than attack. But then when they are on D, they will have to be mindful of the kick as well. Finn's little bag of chips, obviously dangerous. I don't know who they will have in their system. It could be Maunder, it could be Simmons, could be Hogg, potentially covering that little space behind the immediate line, but it needs to be covered for sure, because if they're flying up, it'll be tough to deal with if Finn kind of drops it on the toe as accurately as he did in the semi-final. It's a tough thing to deal with unless you're kind of expecting it.
They've a lot of good, especially in the forward pack. They have a lot of dominant tacklers. You know, I think Jacques Vermeulen's a very dominant tackler. Johnny Gray, Ewells, huge tacklers who put in big collisions and just make it messy for the halfbacks. And that has to be the first port of call. It's just Irabaran and Finn Russell never get a good clean ball to work with. They always have someone in their face. They have less time, less space to work with. That is that's what they want to be trying. That's the picture. They want to be putting them under pressure.
If Finn's getting an armchair ride, it might be too much to ask for them to contain him. Like if it's not being stopped or slowed at source, then it's just the job is too much for the likes of like Slade will be massively overwhelmed with Vakatawa running at him, sitting him down pretty much every time if they're getting that quick ball, and then ultimately not being able to handle it unless Finn is having to rush that pass or force that pass, and he can cough up the ball cheaply when he does go to the toe and it's not quite on, but that's all born of the pressure that ideally Exeter will be putting on them.
Absolutely, yeah. Exactly, and that's got to be the key for them. Likewise, I think offset piece is where another real challenge emerges. If you're
backs on backs,
yeah, exactly. That's where the job for Slade becomes massive, and the job for whoever they go with at 12, be it Witten or Devoto, to close up that space to make sure if Finn does go narrow, they're making that quick tackle. They're not giving them an inch. And just tightening everything up, making sure that
the back three will have to be alive as well, because normally in the Premiership it's unusual that the back three gets tested quite as much as your centres in terms of the defence, but Racing are a team that will ask that question. So Hogg and whomever else they go with it, be it Woodburn or I'm not sure who's the other option. No, it'll probably be Woodburn.
Woodburn, I'd say, and O'Flaherty.
That's right. But they will have to stay connected on D. Hogg will have to stick some tackles because he'll be asked to make some. All of that is important too, but it's a massive job for the 13 shirt, of course, to try and shut down the outside for them.
And with that, just in terms of, there's obviously a clear picture. Do you see it going one way or the other?
I can see it going either way. I'm kind of flip-flopping in my head here. It's a tight game. I can see a world where Exeter are the strongest, more disciplined team, and they get the double done because they might deserve it on the balance of what they've shown this year. On the flip side, I can also see them losing both finals and being very, very disappointed. I can see that as a possibility. Racing have definitely as much as they're kind of a mercenary team, it's tough to like some of what the French clubs do, but what I do like and appreciate is that they have an ethos too. As much as we've been harping on Exeter knowing exactly what they're trying to do, Racing are placed with the U Arena, the closed roof. They play some fantastic footy. They have Finn at 10. They know exactly what they're doing with their pacey halfbacks. They want to create flair rugby. They want to attack that way.
They should win the Champions Cup final for the nutmeg try alone.
On
so many great
sex
tries.
Appeal, obviously give it to Racing. But I think my head is leaning towards Exeter. The intangible is Exeter have shown a capacity to bottle it in these
there's a
occasions
mentality
before.
thing. Like they're finals, and they haven't played many finals, and this is as big a game as they've had in their history. And while the intangibles would lean in their favour in the sense that there isn't an occasion to be overawed by, in a sense, because there isn't loads of fans. They're not out in this new location in the south of France with all the colour and all the warmth and all the pomp that they might have on a normal season. They're just rocking up as they have been to one of many stadiums in middle of England, and are
hopefully putting on a clinic.
And are just going to play a game there with no fans and no fuss. So in that regard, you would expect that they should be able to sort of just control their environment. But they know that it's a big game. It's a much bigger game than they've had. So in that regard, there's sort of a question mark around mentality. When I look at the Exeter team, I think I do see ruthless efficiency. I don't see perfection, as you say. They haven't been truly tested. I think
haven't seen them have to come back.
It's often been a refrain of people they'd love to see X team in Europe, Saracens or Leinster as it has been, play the Crusaders. And I think if Exeter do the double, that point might get made again. But I think if Exeter truly were to play the Crusaders, I think they'd be shocked. I think that the Crusaders would put on a pace that their defence probably wouldn't live with. I think they'd put scoreboard pressure on them that they've never had. I think they'd be too slow. They'd be too slow to respond. They wouldn't be able to control the tempo, and the Crusaders would be much, much, much too good for them, and it would be a solid, easy win for the Crusaders.
Potentially, we'll never know.
No, we won't. But but my point is that they're not a perfect team by any stretch. But I look through Europe, and I don't know. Racing, it would be phenomenal if they were to do it, but I don't know if they're actually the team that's better than Exeter, that's the team that's out to punish and beat this Exeter team.
They might be. I think the first quarter is vital. If it's close to level or one score game, then I'm making Exeter pretty firm favourites. What I'm hoping for is that Racing can start with a pace, take the lead, put that scoreboard pressure on them, and then we'll find out a little bit more about Exeter if they can come back.
I fear for Racing. I think Racing are going to start fine. I don't think they're going to recognise the importance of the scoreboard pressure. I think they're going to take 3-pointers. Then I think in the middle third of the game they're going to be sloppy.
Gassed.
No, just sloppy. They're going to make silly errors at times. They're probably going to overplay the ball and going to play Exeter into the game. And then Exeter will start putting the scoreboard pressure. I think it's going to be an Exeter game. I think it's going to look like an Exeter game, especially out in England. Maybe I'm wrong. I was wrong not to back Finn Russell to beat Saracens in the semi-final.
Yeah.
And Finn Russell's one of my favourite, if not my favourite player in the world right now. And I should probably be backing him to the sun to get it done. But I just think, on balance, the two teams, Exeter are better and Racing are just a bit too sloppy to punish Exeter and to really, really test them. I think Wasps might even give them a better game.
Maybe so.
But maybe that could be pessimistic thinking. We know Racing.
Well, then I will, by contrast, back the Racing guys to blitzkrieg them in the first quarter and then get it done in a humdinger, despite Exeter trying to come back by the end.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be nice.
Anyway, with that, I suppose we'll move on, for there is another final. We have the Challenge Cup.
Yes.
A little bit less important, obviously, because it's the tier below, but pretty good contest as well. We have Bristol Bears, Pat Lam's Bristol, up against Toulon, a new look Toulon. Pretty interesting thing. We have Andrew Brace refereeing it. It's at Friday at 8 o'clock British time, I think 9 o'clock local time. And it's in Aix-en-Provence in France.
Which is next to, I don't know what the big city is, but it's very close to, it's Marseille. It's next to Marseille, which is right next to Toulon. It's within a stone's throw. It's practically a home game for Toulon. Yes. Bristol must be pulling their hair out. They got the Champions Cup final in their home ground, and yet they have to travel away basically to Toulon.
Yes.
Although mercifully there's going to be some fans, and I think 1,000 fans.
Yes, which will be good to see. A bit of colour for the occasion that's in it, and the weather has been largely dry and warm. Good rugby playing conditions in South France. Who'd have thunk it? But seemingly that is what we're in store for. Maybe not. Obviously forecasts are probably, it's Wednesday as we shoot this, but probably a decent rugby playing conditions. Then just in terms of colour, obviously Toulon have the 3 stars above their crest. They have much more European pedigree than our friends Bristol, who have been on the up and up, have been developing wonderfully. But this is one of their first time reaching this stage of this competition. So
Toulon have they've finished runner up in this competition twice on the way to winning 3 Champions Cups, and they've done all of that in the last 10 years.
Yes.
So I think 5 of the last 10 years they've been involved in a European final.
There you go. Well, it was 2010 and 2012 where they've been in final of this competition before, so kind of before their great run. But
it was on the build. It was all building. 2013 is when they won the Champions Cup for the first time.
Yeah, and 2012 they lost to, was it Biarritz? Yeah, Biarritz. They have pedigree here before, but they have not actually won it. Just in terms of the colour as well, whichever team wins will be the 16th winner. Neither team has won this as well, so in both finals they'll have a new winner of the comp, which is kind of nice. Both teams have averaged conceding 1.3 tries per game, which is the best defensive stats of anyone in this competition, which is impressive from both of them. And then just as far as the ethos, both are very different teams despite that stat, and you can kind of see that in some of the stats. Bristol have averaged the most carries with 150 per game, meters made 562, clean breaks 18.3, defenders beaten 32.9, passes 222 or 223, even offloads as well. They've averaged the best of all of those, 12.3 offloads per game they average.
Right.
And they have joint most turnovers with 7.3, which is level with Toulon, who have the highest tackle success rate, which is up at 88%. Kind of shows the difference there between the two sides in terms of ethos. Morahan for Bristol has made the most line breaks, 21 line breaks in the competition. Right. Fantastic. He has also made the most meters, 499 meters in the comp for Luke Morahan. He's dangerous. And then on the wing for the other side, we have Gavin Villiers, who has made 329 meters from his 24 carries, which is an average of 13.7 per carry, which is the most of anyone. There you go. Which is apparently true. And he's also made the most turnovers of any back, with 8, which is very impressive. But all of those kind of point me to the fact that Bristol are the rambunctious, swashbuckling, wide, exciting, pacey team.
Yes.
Toulon are a bit more physical, a bit more bludgeoning, a bit kind of methodical in their approach. They know what they're about. And they have decent halfbacks and decent team, but they were at this level in this competition. They've shown themselves to be a clinical force and difficult to beat. and certainly on recent showings from Bristol, they are full of excitement and potential, but their recent dismantling by Wasps would cause you pause.
I mean, we were looking ahead to the game last week against Wasps, and boy, oh boy, were they made to look silly in that game.
They were blown away in every department, and they looked impotent with the ball, and they couldn't identify where the space was, and they were made a few selection errors as well. That cost them. They got it all kind of wrong.
They got it very, very wrong. Yeah. So there's massive work-ons for Bristol. They're a team they're a coming force. Mm-hmm. They may manage to make post-season there's a post-season equivalent, I guess, in the Challenge Cup by making a final and making post-season in the Premiership. So they're playing finals footy for the first time in a long time.
It's fantastic. Great to see. They only came up 2 seasons ago, so it is a fantastic track record. It remains to be seen whether is this the season they get their hands on some silverware. This is obviously a huge chance for them to do so. We saw Clermont got won it last year, and it was a fantastic opportunity for that team to get silverware. Is it too soon for Pat Lam's Bristol?
Yeah.
Or do they have enough for this Toulon
side? That's the question mark. I mean, it looked awful too soon for them last week against Wasps. I mean, they had to play at a higher level in a big finals game, and they got blown away. They had no answers in any department on the pitch.
Yeah.
They were like sluggish at the breakdown and punished. But that said, they are thoroughly the most impressive side in this competition going into the final. And if you park the Premiership disappointment, their last European outing was a stunning show against Bordeaux in the semi-final.
Game. We were billing it as one to watch in the lesser comp, but it was fantastic. Bordeaux were brilliant as well. Extra time, both teams inseparable after 80 minutes. A fantastic humdinger of a game, and Bristol made the game-winning play to get it done, which is obviously a good sign in a team and in a game as well. You want that.
Yes.
Toulon's that was finished. What was it? 37-20 after extra time, which showed a really good fitness level as well.
Bordeaux had to play extra time with 14 men because of an injury, which is a crappy rule.
It's an unfortunate rule. It kind of did spoil that a little as far as contest.
Change that tomorrow. Yeah. What on earth is that? By the way, this is such a tangent, but I was just thinking, stop giving out about there being too many subs in rugby. It's a tough game. It's played by proper professional athletes, and the collisions are fierce.
Yeah.
This is not like they're harping back to the 1970s. This is not the 1970s, and the guys are much tougher, and there's going to be injuries, and teams shouldn't be punished for having injuries, and teams should absolutely, it's a squad game, and that's fine, and that's good, in fact.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that rule should be changed yesterday. I don't know why it would be that you would be punished for having an injury in that way. I know there's the whole bloodgate. You could fake an injury if you're allowed to put on a sub on for an injury, but just
don't.
Catch
you can
teams
make
who
that
do that
illegal.
Catch teams who do
illegal.
that. Yeah, exactly. But let teams sub if they have an injury. So that was unfortunate.
It was, because
Bristol were
probably a fantastic game. Well, and certainly by contrast, Toulon, a pedestrian 34-19 win over Leicester, who were very fortunate to be there by the grace of a COVID walkover. Really had no right being in a semi-final of any competition.
Leicester are one of the ugliest teams in Europe at the moment, and that doesn't look set on changing.
No, and Toulon didn't really have to get out of second or third gear to brush them aside, so we didn't really learn anything about them from that, and they didn't learn anything about it either. It was a bit of a nothing contest, whereas the humdinger was the Bristol one. But then just in terms of this game, obviously we'll break
squad news first of all, and there's a bit of a massive one. Like, first of all, Bristol have
bit of an injury crisis.
Some injury. So Charles Piatow, who we kind of knew, not involved. Purdy, we know, not involved. Still injured, still missing from their team. 2 vital guys when they are fit. And then there's concern over Chris Vui, the lock, Samoan guy who's very good, liked a lot by Pat Lam, and then Nathan Hughes, who they brought in, who's been their number 8 this year, who's ever improving, and a rare dose of nice almost test level physicality in that Bristol pack, which is something they're going to need massively, because Toulon have just rocked up with a now fit Eben Etzebeth, which he played last week in the top 14. That if they can roll him out and back him for this final, and Eben Etzebeth's in,
Taufi Fanua or something are huge.
Yes, it's an utter, it's a really tough picture for that Bristol pack, because Etzebeth is one of those exceptional players in the world, and he's come back from injury. He might not be the force that we know from the World Cup, but the force that we know from the World Cup was
winning every contact by many meters.
And it didn't matter who he was playing, whether it was Maro Itoje or whoever. He was knocking them on both sides of the ball. He was just knocking them backwards. He's become a very mature player who now knows how to use his physicality, and he would be outside of him and Radradra, he would be with him and Radradra would be the two elite players on the field.
And considering how physicalised, if you like, for the theme of the show, Bristol were at the hands of Wasps, with Joe Launchbury nursing an injury during that last game. Ebenezer is a step up on that, and they'll need Vui and Hughes, who are stalwarts in their team, need them fit, but there are doubts over them. I think Vui's nursing a calf strain, and Nathan Hughes got a shot in the ribs, so hopefully they're available for selection, because otherwise it's a very, very tough ask if they're having to beat Toulon without them. But then, even still, they've
a few different options outside of that. Toulouse, they have Baptiste Saran and Louis Carbonel. The young Saran, obviously, we know is a French international, and Carbonel is a young sort of fly half who they're pretty excited about. He's looked very tidy in the games he's played.
Yeah,
he's still largely unproven at the top level, but he's going to be an exciting prospect. They've got Toeva at 13 has come in from Clermont, where he was last season. He's an exceptional ball runner. And Radradra will have his hands full with that guy. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
And they've also got Sergio Parise, really classy. Obviously, Sergio on his day is fantastic.
Yeah,
a
few very, very good. Charles Olivon is also another guy I'm really
Facundo Issa. We haven't seen Facundo Issa play in the Champions Cup. He was playing for them the other week in the Top 14. That is it's a question mark as to who they go for. Obviously, we don't have the squads right now because they have so many options, and they make curious decisions sometimes too long.
They do,
But the squad is going to be massive for them. I mean, they've got some great players. Charles Olivon in the back row.
He's one of my favourite young French back rowers.
You could put a back row together of Issa, Olivon, and Parise. That's a challenge for an Exeter team that got destroyed by one player in Willis last week.
So they'll need to up their game, no doubt that is true. But Toulon, definitely I would give them the edge as far as squads in terms of both spending power and just power.
Well, Bristol have fair spending power. I mean, if you pivot to Bristol and what they've got going on, I mean, outside of just Radradra,
Semi Radradra is
a big one.
Well, outside of him, you have Morahan and a few other Dangerman. Malins has been in great form as well. So Bristol are a very tidy attacking team, for sure. They will have to match up with the physicality of this monster pack of Toulon. It'll be a game of power versus speed, size versus speed, and it'll be nice to see Bristol very sharp and keen to identify and attack space. So with that, I suppose we'll move into the winning conditions for both. Bristol, when they have the ball, how do they want to use it? Semi Radradra is point number one. That's how you want to use it. You want to get him on the ball in space, attacking whoever's in the 13 shirt. Obviously, you were saying it's Toeva's back, I hope. In the semi-final with Bryce Heem, which I think is a poor matchup if they're picking Bryce Heem at 13.
Right.
But whoever is in the 13 shirt will have their hands full against Semi Radradra, who I think for one of the first times in history he's nominated for European Player of the Year despite playing in the Challenge Cup.
With two different teams, Bordeaux for the early part of the season, and then Bristol post lockdown, which is an interesting dynamic. But he was sensational in both, and I dare say if he was still in Bordeaux, it would be Bordeaux we'd be talking about
Probably
right now.
True.
Absolutely, Radradra is magnificent. In terms of how the sides match up, I mean, last week we watched, and we've seen on a number of occasions sides expose Bristol for being too wide. They go wide all the time. They like to get their wingers' hands on the ball, and they'll give it to Luatua off 9, and there's just no way Luatua is trucking it up. You can forget about it. He's passing it out to the 10, who's passing it in turn out to the wing, and sometimes Radradra will be there and he'll step in and he'll be the contact, and other times they'll just keep shifting it until it gets to the wings, and then they'll do that the other side of the pitch, and then they'll do that the other side of the pitch. Now what we watched on a number of occasions is sides exposing that, and we watched it last week. Radradra had nowhere to go. Every time he had the ball, there were Wasps guys ready to tackle him. They'd done a clinic on tackle Radradra. This is what we have to do: get around the legs, get double team him, stop him from getting the offload away, and catch him behind the gain line, and they did it. And then they were kind of lost. But what I would say is that the Bristol attack does match up quite well against what Toulouse bring.
Or Toulon,
Or Toulon, sorry.
Like in terms of how you typically want to go about when you're up against a bigger, meaner pack, you do want to run them around, you do want to move the pill from side to side and force them to cover more metres and more space. So I think they should start with that, but it would just... the onus is on their halfbacks. Either Randall or what was Euro, the guy who played last week. I think it probably will be Randall usually.
I think in this competition.
And Sheedy obviously at 10. they need to be sharp enough to recognise that, yes, we need to go wide, move them about. But if they are fanning out, if they're doing like we've seen a few teams do, keep their feet, keep their width, and like actually Sarries a few years ago were experts at doing that, just staying on their feet, holding the width of the pitch, and just covering every blade of grass, forcing you back inside. Like Toulon, if they manage to coordinate their defence enough to do that, they need to recognise it quickly and shift that point of contact subtly and with speed. They can't just kind of wander into contacts off 9 passively, tamely. No matter who it is, even if it's Nathan Hughes, he will get turned over, be it by being smashed or by whatever. It needs to be deception and speed, but they need to identify where the space is and go there directly. Like, don't be afraid to straighten if the space is in the 9 channel. Randall can go sometimes.
Absolutely. They have to be a bit more creative. I mean, one of the criticisms that you could level at Bristol is something that we've seen sort of in times gone by. Like, before Semi Ranradra was the hot topic, and he is an exceptional player, there was Nemani Nandolo from Fiji as well, who's an exceptional operator and an exceptional physical specimen, quite like Ranradra was.
Yes.
And he had this lovely deft touch, and we saw him, he burst onto the scene really in the Crusaders team, and he was playing for Fiji obviously as well, but he would be put in space, he'd have a deft touch on his toe, he'd have magnificent physical capabilities, he was all over the place, had lovely hands, he could be used in so many ways, and when he was put in space, he was an absolute nightmare to defend. And Ranradra, very similar, perhaps with less of the kicking game, but also power and explosivity and pace as well, and a super offloading game as well. Very similar. And what we saw was when Nandolo came to Europe, he played in a Montpellier shirt, and gradually Montpellier, who are sort of a mid-level French team, started leaning more and more on Nandolo until it just became the give it to Nandolo show, and all of a sudden he was lining up at first receiver with the instructions, smash what's in front of you.
And it's not where you want your best attacking weapon.
You're seeing Leicester do that now, and
Leicester with
Nandolo. You're seeing them do that now, and it's just a little frustrating. I think there is an onus on Bristol, and I've just started to see it creep into their game, where they look out of ideas and they just give it to let Ranradra go. Let's see what he does. You can't really do that. At the top level, teams are going to be marking these guys, and no one is exceptional enough that if the game plan is give it to him, that they're not going to be dealt with. And that is the concern for Bristol, is that, especially last week, you saw it a few times, like he was given the ball, he had 3 men on him, and his instruction was, hey, perp this guy, step this guy, and get away.
Well, we saw it by the end of the game, when they did manage to grab a try, it was Maylands was where the space was, because Ranradra was up front. They've got
Alapati Leua, they've got Siale Piatau, Luke Morahan. They've got great players.
They do.
So they've got, the onus is on them to create.
Little Nyatai inside of Ranradra is a physical character as well. Where is it again?
Siale Piatau,
even I should say. They have a lethal backline potentially. They just need to be clinical. They need to take their chances. Obviously need to set the tempo. Tempo will be so important in this game. The winning condition for Bristol is a high tempo game.
For sure.
If it's a slow tempo game at all, I really don't back them. They need to be able to dictate that
obviously
pace.
A lot depends on whether Toulon go for their biggest best pack with the likes of Eben Etzebeth. I mean, if Eben Etzebeth plays and if Eben Etzebeth looks like Eben Etzebeth, that's going to be a colossal big ask anyway. And it is going to involve speed.
Well, when they're defending, if Vui and Hughes are available themselves, and Luatua and all of these guys will need to make their presence known on D. They all need to make big physical hits. Sinclair as well, vital to their chances. Ben Earl, he owes his team big stuff from last week, methinks, because he was nowhere against Wasps.
Well, I'd say and
he's been brilliant.
I mean, Ben Earl is a guy who's been talked about in the context of an English cap. And now, you got Currys and Underhills and
Ludlums and
Willis
and
Willis, who schooled him last week in a Wasps jersey, and all of a sudden Ben Earl has fallen down the pecking order a little bit. And I'd say he's had to sit with the fact that everyone's talking about Jack Willis after that semi-final last week, and that he really didn't come to the show and didn't lay a glove, frankly, on the breakdown area, and it was just a complete mess, and he disappeared. He receded into the team, and he ceased to become a factor. And so he
can't afford that.
It's like, if you're talking about Nathan Hughes being out, he's going to be so huge for this game. Can he get the jackal? Can he harass them? Can he get in the face of Louis Carbonell, the young 10, and disrupt him?
Can it be his job to do it? Or I think between himself and Thacker at 2, those are two pacey loose forwards. Even though Thacker is a number 2, he acts like a pacey loose forward. Get him and go get the both of them pressuring the halfbacks, forcing Toulon to just lose patience and kick it to them, which they are prone to do if they can be shut down. The defensive cohesion is very important, but also having those key men make key plays, because the tendency for Bristol is to be a little bit too soft and willing to cough up the try just so he can restart the game. It's finals footy. You will not get away with that. And Toulon know that. Toulon will take their points when they're on offer and try and build a scoreboard that'll hopefully kind of buckle Bristol under the pressure of it, under the weight of it. Bristol have to be able to respond to that, have to be cohesive in their D-line, and also have to have a few key men like Earl step up and really make themselves felt all over the park.
Absolutely, for sure. In terms of the set piece, I mean, needless to say, the onus is on sort of Toulon to really attack this area. I mean, we mentioned Etzebeth. They have huge front rowers. It doesn't matter who they go with. They usually go with Setiano, I should say, or Gigashvili, even at tight head. They've got Taufi Fanua. They've got huge physical.
Baptiste Gros at loose head is a pretty good scrummager as well.
They've got huge scrummaging forwards, and like a lot of French teams, especially the bigger French teams, they do tend to make an emphasis of that. There's a Georgian influence working its way through the top couture in terms of making teams feel the scrum.
For sure.
Not that they needed that essentially. Like
the French love a scrum as well. They for sure they will want to prime pressure. What is a kind of soft underbelly of Bristol. Bristol have, fortunately, a world-class tight head at their disposal. Zinkler, not John Afoa, who started last week perplexingly. John Afoa is good for a 20-minute shift to lock down a scrum at the end.
Zinkler out of the semi-final, Pat. That was a mad one.
It was a dubious
sentimental
call.
one.
It was a dubious call. But ideally now Zinkler will be starting this game, and it is on him to try and lock that down. If he can produce solidity, just parity, then the focus shifts from the forwards to the backs, where I think Bristol have the edge, honestly. If it becomes a game about tempo and back play, then Bristol win it, and it starts at the set piece, getting that solidity. The line out for both of them has actually been a bit of a sticking point. Neither of them have been rock solid on line out. Both Etriard, the two for Toulon, and Thacker have shown loose starts on occasion throughout this competition and their domestic competitions. So there's potential for pressure, like stealing, jumping at 2. I think is good policy for both of them. Just get up in their face at 2, and maybe he'll throw it to you.
I think depending, I'm gonna be a broken record with depending on whether or not we see Etzebeth. I really hope we do. It's a European final. I'd love to see Eben Etzebeth. If Eben Etzebeth comes into that Toulon team, he's going to be a huge difference maker in terms of just giving solidity to everything that they do, including the line out. He's a guy who can take responsibility and just gives everyone around him confidence because they all know how good he is.
For sure. Well, regardless of him being there or not, Toulon will be the side more likely to go to things like the maul. If they can get that clean ball, they will try and test them there. So obviously it needs to be sharp defence, not sloppy defence from your Vuis and your Luatuas. They do need to get their hands in, but do so legally. Don't be getting the penalty clock ticking over and inviting Toulon into your territory to smash into you, because when Toulon do have the ball, they will carry relentlessly, they will carry physically. They have a myriad of options in the back row, like we were saying, Parise, Olivon, Lacafia, very dynamic runners of the football and creative linkmen as well, capable of drawing and giving. They will cause them problems if they can get on the ball early and often, which is exactly what Toulon will want to do with them.
I've just looked up Eben Etzebeth's situation, and they reckon he's going to be injured for the final.
Well, there you go.
I wasn't 100% sure because I saw he was playing.
Well, to be honest, even without him, it's a combination of either Taufi Fanua, who else do they have? I have him listed here. Where was it? Yeah, they have either Taufi Fanua or Rabaj, who started.
Maybe I'm wrong. That's an old article. No, Etzebeth might be back. It's back to being up in the air.
Yeah, it's up in the air. But they have Alan Uesi as well as another option. They have depth. Toulon definitely have depth in the stables. But obviously Etzebeth would be huge for them because they will, with the ball, they're trying to impose their physicality. It's classic Toulon.
He'd almost cancel out Ron Roger for me. He could be that dominant.
He could.
Only in a different area.
Forwards win games, backs decide by how much. If it becomes a big dominant display from Toulon, they will win the game. And that's what they're going to try and make happen. Their halfbacks, I would go with Baptiste Serran. They did start Takalua in the semi-final, but the semi-final was only against Leicester, so he didn't really get a read.
Serran's a seasoned international and a very good one.
I would be getting him in there with Carbonell to try and kick them into the right areas where they can then impose their forward thing. Just turn Bristol around, make them swivel the whole game.
I expect them to do that. Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to see them kick a little smarter than your stock bombs.
Yes.
I'd like to see them
touch finders and
find touch and put set piece pressure on them and make the game about that.
For sure.
Start and frustrating and physical and disruptive.
Yes.
I mean, the template is there in terms of how to beat Bristol. Disrupt them, never allow them to get that continuity going, the confidence on the ball, always have them exiting, always have their pack working, wear them out.
And then as far as their multi-phase, like their backline is functional without being particularly spectacular, I think, but they do take tries, and it's all built on dominant collisions. Like it's classic Toulon ball. I remember from a few seasons ago when they were really mighty and colossal. Like, this team aren't quite as big as some of the Toulon teams we've seen, but they're still pretty huge. And when they get their multi-phase going, it's remarkable to watch. They can scatter big men like skittles through dynamic carries and just dominate the collision zone over and over again. And so that then their wingers, no matter who they are, like Villiers has grabbed a lot of tries on the wing for them, but it's like it's a secondary job. They pummeled them into submission, and then the backs are on hand to finish. That's going to be the Toulon game plan. Going to try and break Bristol, who have shown some soft underbelly potentially. Like, it could be.
It's a fun wee dynamic in Europe, isn't it? You've got the Champions Cup final is a conservative, physical, marauding English team against a free-flowy, attacking French team. And the Challenge Cup final is the reverse.
The reverse,
It's a free-flowing English team
top couture's team.
Yeah.
And lovely, sexy Pat Lam rugby is potentially there. How do you defend it if you're Toulon? You smash them. You smash them hard and awful.
Yeah, you stop everything at source. But the problem is, and if you're a big forward on a rugby pitch, and we've seen this before, you experienced it before, it's so much tougher against a team that just moves the point of contact. And so Toulon do have to be a bit smart. Like, if they're sitting around the ruck waiting to knock Thacker or Nathan Hughes yards back, sure, if Bristol go to them, great. But chances are what they're going to be doing is moving it from side to the side.
They need to be alive to that threat. Sure.
Their loose forwards like Olivon needs to be dispersed, or Parise needs to be dispersed a little wider than the tight, and they need to be defending out wide, and they just need to make sure that they have the outside covered, because frankly Bristol don't want to take you on in that area. They know they don't. One-on-one they're probably going to lose those matchups, but out wide that's exactly where they want to be. So you've got to flood the wide channels. You've got to force them in make them earn the right to go wide. They're not. Your defence needs to start fanned out. You've got two men on Radra wherever he is. You're going to fly up in his face. You're not giving him an inch of space. And then the onus is on Bristol then to see if they can work something on the inside and force your defence to come in. The danger with Toulon is they get all their forwards lined up either side of the ruck, and they try to come flying out at Luatua or whoever the first receiver is, and they just tip it on and move it and frustrate them.
It depends what side we'll see. We could see a sluggish Toulon who aren't quite game for it if they don't, if they rest a load of players because they're focusing on the top couture or some such thing. Potentially you could see a sluggishness. They need to be very cohesive in their defensive line and fan out. Obviously, that's just the main thing, like you were saying. But they also need to not overly commit to dead rucks as well. Don't go flopping in there, not least because they are pinging going off your feet or going side entry. But mainly you just want to win your contact, get up back onto your feet and spread out, cut off the outside for them, and then watch Bristol kind of flounder. If you do that successfully, they will flounder it and throw you chances.
No question.
Because that's got to be Toulon's game plan. And also force turnovers in the tight. Last part of it, attack the ball. When you get them in the tight, you are generally one-on-one, you're the stronger team. Try and hold them up, try and turn the ball over. Just try and make it as hard as possible for Bristol to play their game.
And find rhythm and speed.
Punish
them for taking a contact.
Exactly.
Like, Bristol hate taking contacts, and they're going to be fearful of the contact. They're going to be constantly moving the ball, and then when they eventually have to truck it up, dominate them, pick them up, attack the pill, make it awkward and horrible.
Make the ruck be a 6-7 second ruck because you're flying in there if you can. But
no, just even as the tackler, you're holding them up for a little longer, you're roughing up the ball, you're driving them back, and then getting it down, and that spoils it enough. It's not like, you're not saying you have to flood all your men.
No, you don't, unless you sniff a turnover, which you can do. But like generally, good discipline. It needs a collective awareness on D as to when to do that and when not to. But generally, I back their physicality to try and shut them down. But then, with all that said, those are conditions where you can see a win for either side potentially. Where do you see this one going?
It's tough. I mean, frankly, I haven't watched a lot of Toulon at the Talk Tours. Talk Tours is very frustratingly not available. It's not being broadcast here, so you have to pirate it if you want to watch it. And frankly, I haven't been, so I missed a lot of games. That I usually pick one game of a weekend if I want to watch it, and that's not usually the one involving Toulon,
Toulouse, or Racing or someone.
So they've been going okay. I got a glimpse into them in European rugby. I'm curious to see. I think, like, my instinct says to just lean on pedigree and history and just how poor Bristol were last week. Despite the fact that if you assess the competition, Bristol have been the best team in it. And they certainly
on statistics, they're dominating more than Toulon.
Semiran Radra is there. I tell you, like, I almost want to bail out of the decision and say if Etzebeth plays Toulon, if he doesn't Bristol.
Radra.
Yeah. Because he could cause them havoc. He could absolutely open them up, and they could be moody. But the fact that they're at home,
that's tough.
Tips the scale for me. Maybe I just thought Bristol were so poor last week. I thought, like, maybe they'll come back, but they look like a side who are coming. But finals footy and actual silverware might be beyond them this season. So for that reason, I'll say Toulon in a scrappy one.
Okay. Well, then, by contrast, I will back Pat Lam to the hilt. I have a lot of time for
I'm backing the ugly teams. It's not like me. It's not good,
really.
It
might turn out to be prudent because forwards win games, as you say.
Yeah.
But no, I'm going to back Bristol to get it done and to get their first bit of major silverware. Like Pat Lam's conduct before them when they won the Pro 12 against a Leinster team in that final who were bigger and stronger than them, but slow and sloppy and sluggish. And if Toulon are slow and sloppy and sluggish,
and if Bristol come with the right
attitude and the right temperament, guys like Ben Earl step up in response to their underperformance, then hopefully they set the right tempo, get some tries on the board early, and win a humdinger. Because the Challenge Cup can be high scoring. The Challenge Cup final in the last few years has been a high scoring game, and it's in France, so that could suit Bristol's high flying stakes.
I just suspect they're out of gas. That's the other thing. That's the other thing, is that, like, with all the Premiership games that have been going on, they looked last week like a side that have no more to give.
For sure, their squad was stretched enough as is.
They had to work so hard to make the semi-finals, and now I just think, I think it'd be beyond them. But maybe not. Who knows?
Bristol by 19.
Bristol by
4.
Okay,
that's what I'll say.
I'll say Toulon by 5.
Ooh. Okay, and with that, then we will move on.
In other news this week, there is starting more international rugby. The South American Four Nations, which is sort of replacing the usual America's Rugby Championship this year, is going ahead this week. It's starting. All the games are going to be in Montevideo in Uruguay, and there's a double header. There's 4 teams involved. There's an Argentinian 15, the Chilean national side, Uruguay and Brazil.
Yes.
And Argentina 15 play Chile on Saturday. It's 8 p.m. British Standard Time.
Not sure what that is.
A little early.
Montevideo.
It's about 4 hours behind, so I guess it'd be 4 p.m. in the Saturday afternoon, which is followed immediately at 11:15 British time by Uruguay Brazil. So it's a double header, ending in the Uruguay game over in Montevideo. I'm not sure what the situation is with fans. And to be honest with you, it's been a tough tournament to find out much about. I managed to I had to dig pretty deep.
Dive.
It's not being covered in sort of the mainstream, and there's a reason for that. You know, they're not. It was announced today they're not going to be fully capped internationals. It's not quite the same as, you know, the America's Rugby Championship, where you have the US and Canada as well coming in and making it super interesting. But there's a lot of merit to this competition.
For sure, it's good to see these teams back on the pitch playing competitive fixtures. Anyway, Uruguay obviously set the world alight with the famous win in the World Cup. That's kind of the last we've seen of them. They're back in action here.
100%
Argentina as well. We were mentioning, haven't really seen any of them. It's only Argentina 15, but nice to see some of the talent coming through Argentina, and just again, good to see rugby being played on another continent.
It's a chance. Yeah, exactly. I think South America is one of the coming sort of forces in terms of Tier 2
certainly
rugby.
In Tier 2, yeah.
And Chile are a good example of that. Another side with great rugby instincts, a lot of footballing brains over there, sort of converted. And they put together sick plays and score nice tries. And
certainly in the Sevens game they scored pretty tries too.
The tempo of South American rugby often reflects that, which you've seen in Argentina in recent seasons with that lovely backs rugby, nice small, quick, flashy guys who have great instincts for attacking rugby.
Yeah, lethal winners as well.
It tends to hence be like a really, really nice watch as a competition.
Yeah.
And it's just a chance for sort of nerds like us as well to sort of watch and have a look out for who are the coming talent. Particularly in Argentina 15 as well, they're going to be using this as a way to blood young talent and young teams, and so it's a competition that's going to be going on. It's going to be available to watch, I think, through there's either, I'm not sure if it's on the YouTube channel or if it's on the app, but it's Sudamericano Rugby, their sort of organisation, this Rugby Europe equivalent over there, I guess.
Right, yeah.
And they'll be broadcasting the game, so it should be available to watch free online. And I certainly am planning on spending my Saturday evening doing that.
Interesting.
Whether others want to come on board, that's up to you. But I think there'll be great watches, and it definitely international rugby of any kind is great to have back. And I think it's just going to be a really refreshing competition
for sure. And then I suppose we can just give a quick look at some of the teams. There are some dynamics. Obviously, the last time we saw the Uruguay we were mentioning, it was a brilliant historic win in the World Cup. We know a little bit about their Los Teros style. Brazil were unlucky not to make the World Cup themselves, have a coming scrum. They're kind of like the forward force in the Americas competition. Really good scrum for penalties mentality. Good to see that kind of footy being played.
Yeah.
And it's just question marks as to will there be gults in standard, because sometimes Argentina 15 can have much too much for all these teams. Will there be still that gap?
There's definitely sort of a tiered list. I suppose top of the pile you have the Argentina 15, which is essentially the equivalent of the Pumas A team. Wherein sort of young players are bred and new talents discovered. Notably this year, Javier Ortega Decio, the big number 8, who's multiple times capped Puma and played for the Jaguares in the Super Rugby final last year. He's going to be in this squad, and he might be playing. So I suspect that's going to be a huge bonus for them. So it's guys who are on the fringes of the Australian of the Argentinian team of the Pumas. And while these are guys who didn't make the flight over to Australia, so they probably won't be involved next month, they are guys who could come into the team, especially if guys stand out.
It's such Argentina 15 just in general tend to play with such aggression and verve. They love they're a high tempo team, but it's like it's an audition tape for the Pumas is essentially what all of these minutes for these guys are. So between the young kids or, like you pointed out, some of the older statesmen who have just found themselves further down the pecking order, there's a lot to play for in this comp or any comp if you're in Argentina 15.
They have been perpetual dominators of the Americas Rugby Championship in seasons gone by, and they revel in sort of the lower intensity environment. They just back themselves, they put a huge amount of speed on it, and they can just catch these young sort of up and coming Tier 2 defences. They can catch them napping so often.
They score some pretty outstanding tries. They are a lovely watch. Play with verve and tempo and kind of fearlessness as well, because you're already on Argentina A. You're not getting dropped here. What you're trying to do is make your case to get brought up into the Pumas, and that involves taking chances, making plays. Obviously, you're at a level where the opposition's a little lower. You're not at rugby championship level, but you want to be. So the onus is on these guys to really put in dominant
especially this week against Chile. I think they will. I think they'll go hammer and tongs at it and probably really give them the absolute business. They will have to be concerned later in the tournament. They have been given a game by Uruguay in times gone by, and Uruguay, as we know, last year a serious coming force. They announced themselves last year as just a brilliant side, and in terms of a refresher, their win over Fiji was magnificent. Their performance against Wales was magnificent, even times against Australia. They laid the nuggets for that in the Americas Rugby Championship. They beat the USA, they beat Brazil, they gave Argentina 15 a game last year, and they came to the World Cup
with some form,
with some real form,
and they got a win for it. They were a part of the greatest pool ever as we were building the pool where every team got their donut scrubbed out. They got their win. They did get physicalised by the Georgian men.
They did.
So they'll have concerns there, obviously, learnings as well. But they're a team on the up. They have a lot of quality players. They
were not the quickest. They were not the biggest team, but they did have a lot of pace and they did have a lot of flair. And the other thing that they had that I really enjoyed seeing in them was a very they played smart rugby. They never panicked. They were disciplined. They didn't give cheap penalties away. I remember when Fiji were trying to come back at them in that game, they defended so patiently. They didn't commit to the breakdown. They weren't in an absolute state of panic because they were locked into their own 22.
No, their exit was pretty tidy. For a tier 2 side, that's rare.
Exactly. There was no sense of panic about them, and there was a great situational awareness to them in terms of games and what
guys
they needed
like
to do.
Arata, who was really good at reading that and giving them an assured head.
Arata and Berchesi at halfback was fantastic. Now what we do have to say is that this squad actually does contain a lot of fresh faces. The side that went to that World Cup was a side that actually had been building quietly in the background for quite a while. And guys like Gaminara, who was brilliant, their captain, and even Kat, the centre, who was fantastic, have actually moved on. And
shame, I did like Kat.
He was great, and their real superstars have managed to actually find careers for themselves in France. So Arata is in France, Berchesi is in France, and Kessler is in France, and those guys are not going to be involved in this competition, which kind of sucks. And that's kind of why
they still have Freitas, I see here.
Yes,
he was an excitement machine
on the wing.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I genuinely think, as well as having classy players, there's just seems to be a very fresh and good mentality in Uruguay. In Los
and just
Terros.
their playing style seems to suit them. They seem to know what they're about. And are building quite nicely. It would be lovely to see them develop a little bit further through competitions like these and over the next years, and see them even more competitive in the next World Cup. That'd be great.
I mean, it could go one of two ways. They could drop off. There could be a hangover. It is their first outing. They could look rusty. But on the flip side, they have players now playing in France, and this is now an opportunity for them to build a squad, which is massive for a tier 2 team.
Huge.
To build more test experience for more guys. And I think as these aren't test games, I know it has that asterisk, but they essentially are. Like Brazil and Chile are going to be going at it.
Well, for a team in the position of Brazil or Chile, it's as good as a test game. It's a test and it's a game.
Exactly. I don't know why Uruguay-Brazil isn't a test match, but I guess it isn't, but it should be.
It's unfortunate. Well, speaking of Brazil as well, just in terms of a distinctive style, they have kind of distinguished themselves as the forward-oriented South American team.
Yes.
They're all about scrums. They are physical defenders, but they can be a little slow, and they can be blitzed by the Uruguayans or the Argentina 15.
They're a little slow for sure, but they are a healthy picture in South American rugby to stop everything looking the same.
They can't have all of it be fast-track running, mad, frenzied rugby, because it doesn't prepare you. And actually, as you saw, like Brazil weren't quite able to do that to Uruguay last year, but Georgia sure were in the World Cup, which is another step up again in terms of slow dominating.
Well, I mean, they were making highlights reels. You mentioned their scrum. They were making highlights reels for their scrums because the sort of inexperienced South American teams they were facing seemed to have zero nous, and they have a very, very solid scrum. They get nice and low. They really do scrum as an 8. It's old school scrummaging. And
similar to old school Argentinian scrummaging back in the day as well. Ledesma and these guys used to really spearhead through the 2, the 8 driving through the 2, and arrowhead.
You had these funny pictures where the scrum would just trot backwards and up, and like the ball would go in and they just free flow forward and the scrum would trot upwards, and there was never, when you're facing that a much bigger clinical pack, you need to have that nous as a prop and as an engine room as well, just to tighten things up a little bit and make it awkward for them and make them slip towards the ground. And often their opponents have none of that. So if they do, I mean, that's the big game this weekend, is Uruguay against Brazil, which has been, Uruguay have edged it, but there have been some ding-dong battles in seasons gone by. And obviously, there's the dynamic of them being neighbours, etc. as well. So it does have a little bite to it, and Brazil will test Uruguay in that area. If Uruguay aren't up to the physicality,
if they've been drilling without contact, they'll be freshly reintroduced to contact by the Brazilian men for sure. And I don't, as you say, I don't know what the situation with fans is over there. I don't know how it's affected like that. All these teams' prep is, like everywhere else in the world, probably a little stifled by COVID. For sure. But just in terms of the history of it, that's what we're looking at identity wise. And Chile, definitely the underdog in this team. They're coming force
further back in their progression.
They are. They certainly in the sevens as well, where they're in the second tier of that too. They can be exciting. It is very much converted footballers. A lot of the time, you can see the footballing instinct. A little too keen to kick the ball away. Not quite understanding how to go through multi-phase rugby.
They're one of the only sides we've seen try and kick the ball repeatedly in sevens.
Yes, yeah, that's true. They are the most kicking side I've ever seen in sevens, and it's funny to watch because they do just have an instinct to drop it on the toe. Yeah. But they move quickly. They definitely play with high tempo, and they try and when their tries come off, when the offloads do stick, they can put together some very pretty sequences of play. I think they will struggle with just the standard.
Yeah, in seasons gone by as well, they've kind of closed the gap on Brazil. I mean, there's very much 4 tiers in this 4-tier competition, which is a concern. But, Chile have pressed Brazil in the past, and Brazil have pressed Uruguay in the past, and Uruguay have pressed the Argentina 15 in the past.
Yes.
So hopefully that gap narrows. I mean, I think this weekend, Argentina 15 against Chile is a tough start for them, but I think they'd expect themselves to give both Uruguay and Brazil a bit of a run for their money as well.
Yeah.
So with any luck, you'll get Chile stepping it up a little level. You get tests for the Argentina 15, and we'll get a nice, fun Tier 2 competition. And it's great to see international rugby all over the world starting to make a comeback, and we're only going to get more and more of that now as the Six Nations comes back as well, and there's Georgians are coming back into it, and there's autumn internationals. There's a very, very exciting test window opening up, and this is sort of another glimpse into it.
Nice to give a good shout out to the South Americans. Keep going, and we'll be watching as well.
Absolutely.
With that, we will move on to our final segment. We have Super Rugby Unlocked. We move back to South Africa. Obviously, their domestic competition got underway last week. We had some good games in that as well. It was good to see some Springboks back in action for their club colours. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of uncertainty around a lot of South African rugby all throughout, between the Rugby Championship, between this competition, between the Pro 16 talks as well. It's nice to just see them back on the pitch playing some rugby.
Doing what they do best.
But in terms of the first round, we had some interesting results. The main fixture, the two big dogs, Sharks v Lions, was a bit of a humdinger tight contest.
Yeah, it was a very good game.
19-16, it finished in favour of the Sharks, who kind of played their get out of jail free card for that one, I think.
They did. Well, I mean, they were very good in the early exchanges. I thought they were they got a nice early try for Werner Koch with some good play from Buthelezi at 7. I thought Noche at 8 was brilliant.
Okay,
and
good.
He's a guy who obviously has been working quietly in the background. He's always been a stalwart in the Sharks, and he's a guy who could potentially feature in South African colours if there are to be South African games this year. He's a guy who could feature as stacked as that back row can be. I wouldn't be surprised to see Noche get in. He looked very skilled, very rangy, quick back row forward, lovely soft hands, dominant in the contact on both sides of the ball. I thought he was excellent. I thought he was front runner for me for man of the match, and Van Heerden in the second row as well was very good. And they got their early try. They got on top of the Lions.
I was going to say Werner Koch. We mentioned him. Sevens man convert. Good to see him on the wing grabbing some meat.
It was Buthelezi did a really good job. Sucked in a couple of tacklers and got the ball out of his hands to Am, and then it was simple 2-on-1. Nice. And Werner Koch has a bit of meat.
Yes, exactly. So it's good to see him get open his account in Super Rugby Unlocked. For sure, some positives, but the Lions definitely did come back into it, and they played with a nice pace. Certainly asked some questions around the fringes. Yankees was pretty impeccable for the most part. Lovely crossfield kick. He made the play of the week with the crossfield kick from the penalty. Good quick thinking, really well executed pinpoint for their try.
Yeah, and I think in general open play, Yankees outplayed Kerwin Bosch, who was a little stuttery. Like the whole Sharks offense for the most part was just a little stuttery and a little reactive. He didn't make too much happen, where Elton obviously had that nice assist and was driving a good pace for the Lions. Marvin Ory as well had a good game.
Yes, the concern is that between those are two guys who are vying for that 10 shirt in the absence of Pollard, and Elton definitely had the better game, but when it came down to it, he made all his kicks up until the moment when he needed to kick to get them level, and he missed that one. And it wasn't that difficult to kick. It was a tricky enough kick, but it was
on the 22 a little out. It was for a kicker of his level, it was a gimme. And this is when I don't want to besmirch him because he's quite a nice footballer, but the Springboks are in a bind in terms of out half if they won't have Pollard, and they won't have Pollard if they're playing in the Rugby Championship. And they can't just have 110 either.
No, that's no solution at all. They need to have options, and at the moment Elton is the incumbent guy on backup, but he kind of lost that during the World Cup when they were going with Franz Steyn in the 6-2 split. That was kind of revealed because whenever the temperature increases just that little bit, when the pressure comes on, he kind of wilts. We've seen it before. We see it happen all the time.
He had a few years in the Springbok 10 shirt where he never quite played. Like, he has issues. He has issues with pressure. He has issues with physicality and intensity. Once, as you say, the pressure valve gets ticked over, Elton often goes begging. So in that regard, like, as good as he looked, that miss I think is massively concerning, and it's almost revealing in terms of this guy probably can't cut it at test level, which is very harsh because he's a lovely player, and I don't like besmirching guys like that. If he gets his chance, I hope it goes well for him.
Yeah, but
it's they're in a bind at out half, and Elton really, having played a flawless game, should have levelled that game and should have gotten the draw away in Durban, which would have been a good result
to start them off, and they were good value for it, but he missed the chance to do it. Then in other news, we had the Cheetahs, as we suspected, starting like a rabbit out of a trap.
Yes.
53 points to 31. A bit of a humdinger, high-scoring game. The Pumas racked in a few soft scores in the second half.
Yeah, it was all over when the Pumas started scoring.
It was over at half-time. Yeah, the Cheetahs looked mean. Looked like they mean business because they do. They have we were mentioning they have a bone to pick, obviously, with the Pro 16 decision, feeling a bit jilted by the SARU. I tell you, that back line that they have with Pienaar at 9 and Schoeman at 10, and then Francois Steyn and Janssen van Rensburg in the centres with Jair and Speckman on the wings and Blommachies at fullback is as good as any backline that's playing in Super Rugby Unlocked, I think. It's a sensational backline. And they can play with such tempo. They are frightening for any team at all. Certainly the Pumas looked shell-shocked and completely outmatched, and I feel for them. They haven't really been playing at that level, and they met a team with a point to prove, with a fair few Springbok caliber players in their starting lineup too.
Well, I think it was definitely good for the tournament that they managed to come back and get a few tries on the board. I think it was definitely helpful for their mentality, and they would have been, if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't come back and got a few scores, they probably would have been in a worse place mentally, obviously, having been spearheaded into this competition and then against one of the allegedly weaker sides getting absolutely pummeled. But no, they did come back into it. I think their out half looks a tidy enough player, and with any luck they can get out of the blocks a little quicker and not be shocked by the sheer pace or physicality of anything going forward. But potentially not.
Well, I think as well as the myriad of lovely tries that were scored by the Cheetahs in the first half, I think there was a defensive set when the Pumas finally got their hands on the ball after conceding 2 or 3 tries. They were pumping on the line, and you've seen in South African derby games before some softness creep in. You've seen from the Cheetahs some softness creep in, and they allowed them to score. They didn't allow them to score. They isolated the man, got the poach, and then were pumped when they got the penalty, and it's like, oh dear, this is going to be a long day. And it was a long day for the Pumas, but it was good to see the Cheetahs get off to a winning start. 53 points scored. Very exciting stuff in perfect conditions.
They have a mean squad and a point to prove, and they are going to be an absolute danger zone for any of the Super Rugby teams.
For anyone, especially away from home up at altitude, they're a very, very tough obstacle to come across.
We know it all too well as Pro 14.
And then possibly the game of the weekend in terms of
for sure,
just the surprise of it all. The Bulls stuttering and scuppering, and despite being physically superior, finding it very difficult to put the Griquas away. 30 points to 23 in favour of the Bulls it was in the end. Very sluggish start to the season for the much fancied Blue Bulls.
The Bulls kind of would remind you of sort of South African teams in the sort of end of Heineken Meyer, start of Alistair Coetzee era, where they do have some physicality. Like, remember the game against Japan? Of course we do, the Brighton Miracle.
Yes,
the kind of tries that South Africa did manage to stay in the game with in that game, despite being sluggish and outplayed and outthought. They did have moments where they revealed themselves, like Lou Diager and Adrian Strauss just winning a one-on-one contact and busting through to score a try. And the Bulls scored a couple of them, which ended up winning them the game. But generally speaking, sluggish.
Not
at the pace
the halfback combination, Van Sale and Mornay. I like Mornay. He's a stalwart. He's ancient. And between them, Van Sale is one of the slower scrum halves in world rugby. It's just a very slow, sluggish halfback pairing you've got.
Yes.
And I don't know quite what their game plan is with the ball with that. It's some of it's kicking, but it's not kicking.
But it's slow without being direct, tight and sharp. There needs to be a sharp physicality to it. Like you can starve a team of possession, especially in this competition where so many of the teams, you get nice weather. It's summer really heading into spring heading into summer over in South Africa. But it's like the weather's fine, they're getting nice days. So if they can cause a team to be starved of possession and really eat up meters, choking them out in the slow contact and maybe putting up a high bomb for them to chase, then you could see the Bulls putting on a winning picture. But they're just not marrying the slowness with any intensity.
Yes. And that's they're getting found out. Like, the Griquas were comprehensively outmatched player for player, physicality wise, but they showed such industry and such a heads up play in terms of all of the tries they took, particularly the one from the cross kick from Mornay that was kept in kind of ambitiously. The little bat up to yourself. It was fantastic tackle on the last man as well. Like, the Griquas really showed a lot of heart, and it was great for the competition, because I was concerned for both them and the Pumas going.
Kasende, the right winger, looked very, very good. Fullback Volmenk, who you just mentioned there as well. I'm not as familiar personnel wise, but those guys looked impressive.
They did.
And it'd be like they're another speedy team who have the capacity in them to give these sides a rumble, and that's great for the competition.
It was. You saw a little bit of the levels just in terms of one of the first Griquas try. They scored lovely fix and give from their number 7, really good shape to it. Got them biting in and created the overlap, and then on the flip side was softed out of a big collision with a Bull, just kind of showing that, like, yes, technically he knows the game. His fix and give is excellent. Just a little bit outmatched as far as the raw physicality that the Bulls did have in spades. Probably should have implemented a bit better, but a great encouraging start for the Griquas. They got their losing bonus point out of it, so they're off to a potentially as good a start as they possibly could have asked for, because they're away from home against a much fancied side. Managed to get something out of the game. And
in terms of what's going on this week, the opening game is on Friday evening, 6 p.m. British Standard Time. It's the Cheetahs against the Bulls in Bloemfontein.
A big, formidable place to go if you are slow and sluggish. The last quarter in Bloemfontein can be a horrible thing, and Cheetahs play some fast rugby.
I tell you, this is a very exciting game. It kicks off exactly one rugby match before the Challenge Cup final, and it's just teed up Friday evening nicely.
Nice.
So this is going to be a lot of fun. This is, for me, is the game of the round. Cheetahs against the Bulls. It's a great matchup, stylistic matchup, and a real opportunity, I think, for the Cheetahs, who have that bugbear, having been left out of the conversation for next season. To really make a statement.
For sure. But then also the Bulls need to find something, and find something quick, because the Griquas and their quick heads up rugby caused them problems enough. The Cheetahs are lethal.
Better at that.
They're better than that.
Roscoe Speckman on the wing, man.
Yeah, for sure. Like they can be devastating. So the onus is on the Bulls to try and impose their physicality and make their tempo be the main picture of the game. It will require some patience. It will require direction, but hopefully they will step up from what was one of the things that off the pace last week.
One of the things that the Bulls don't do is defend with speed. They're very, very reactive on defence, and that is something that the Cheetahs, with Ruan Pinar and Francois Steyn, you're going to expect them to look to exploit that. They're going to try and get it outside of that sort of laboured Bulls defence, which at times can have soft shoulders in it as well. So if they can play that sort of industrious attacking rugby at home at altitude, I don't see a reason why they couldn't really put the Bulls under pressure in this one.
No, I think so too. I certainly backed them in the last quarter to kind of blitz at them at altitude. I tend to back the Cheetahs to make the last quarters theirs. Same with the Lions in their home ground. The question mark is, will their pack be able to stand up? If the Bulls fancy it, will their pack be able to answer that call? Still don't know the answer to that. Their backline looks...
Will Dwayne Vermeulen feature? We
didn't see him last week, despite me picking him for the thumbnail. No. But yes, he is obviously to come back into the side. They do have some great personnel there. I don't know who I'm backing for. I kind of hope for the tournament that the Cheetahs get the win. But I also kind of hope for the tournament that we see the Bulls turn up. If the Bulls turn up and put it to the Cheetahs and pump them and make them feel their physicality, then no regrets at all, the better team win. But if the Bulls are sluggish again and slow, I would love the Cheetahs to punish that with tries.
The other thing is that the Bulls, they do have slowness at halfback, but they also have Cornel Hendricks in there. They have Gio Aplin in there. Arno Botha as a loose forward is very, very
great acquisition for them as well.
So there are tries to be scored against the Cheetahs. There's no reason why they couldn't hold their own even in a shootout at times against what can be a loose defence. So absolutely, I think the Bulls should be going there to try and open up the Cheetahs, and yes, to make them feel their physicality, but also to run in tries against soft shoulders like anybody else would, and I definitely think they should be looking to hold their own and maybe drive a little higher pace than they did in the first game. And it would be nice also to see Mornay playing well, because he's another guy who's going to come into that 10 conversation if they are to play in the Rugby Championship.
If the young lads aren't quite making the grade, then Mornay is definitely an option, as is Pienaar at 9, or 10, or Schoeman, who's the other one for there, or Franz Steyn, who all the 3/4 line or that little line for the Cheetahs are potential Springboks too. So a really good humdinger of a game, that one. And then another one for different reasons, Saturday 3:15 at Griquas Park in Kimberley, we have the Griquas and the Pumas. Probably the two lowest ranked teams, the Currie Cup stalwarts. A chance for either of them, to get a win on the board, which will be huge for them. I would make Griquas favourites on last week's show, on first game evidence alone. But it's potentially a fun game. Both of them seem potentially able to throw the ball around. And
I like to think that the Pumas didn't show us everything that they have last week, that they started slow, they were a little shocked by the pace, but your man, the out half Fouche, looks a tidy player. They got themselves together and played some decent rugby in that second half, and if they can get out of the blocks sharper and match the Griquas for physicality, they also have offensive instincts, and they could make it a nice fun game. So while it is the sort of the lower ebb of this competition, it should be a good game. It should be interesting to see which of them can sort of take it to the other, and make a name for themselves.
Get some points on the board, get themselves up that table early doors. It's only round 2, but a nice chance to get a win on the board. The Griquas obviously with 1 point from their first showing, whereas the Pumas still sitting on a donut in terms of the league standings. So it'd be nice to see either or both play win it. I'd just be looking for a competitive game where both of them get good hit outs for sure. And then the next game, Saturday 6 p.m, the last game of the round.
They, by the way, have zero appreciation for the fact that there's a European rugby final going on during this. But this is what the record button was made for.
Yes, indeed. And record. Stormers v Lions. The Stormers, obviously, we haven't seen them yet in the comp.
No, we get to go to Newlands, Cape Town. Unfortunately, no fans in Newlands.
It'll be a big empty Newlands, which
they
is a
tend
bit
to have
sad.
the best fans, I would say, of all the Super Rugby teams.
No, there's can be a great atmosphere at Newlands for sure. It's unfortunate, obviously, the same thread running through. It is also unfortunate that it clashes with the European final, which is just... Why do they do that?
They both do. European final kicks off between the two games, or during both of the games.
Indeed. And the Lions' tough start kind of continues, because this is the second away fixture for them, and they didn't get the win last week.
They're getting karmic punishment for all those years where they only ever seemed to play at home.
Yes, well, they're not at home here. They're in Newlands, and the Stormers will probably feel confident about their chances coming into this competition.
They've got to have a quiet ambition to win this competition, with the Sharks stuttering, having lost personnel, and the Bulls looking so poor last week, and the Lions being sort of a step down in recent seasons. The hole is there for the Stormers to walk into. I'm not sure if there's any sign of Peter Steff. We mentioned last week there was no sign of him.
Still got an injury.
But they have a good team full of nice big Springboks. I tell you, the front row, you got Malherbe, Bongi, Mbanambi, and Stephen Kitsoff in there. That's
serious international calibre, not just international calibre, top level.
That's World Cup final winning. That's bullying England in the scrum level. Of props. So I mean, that's
and the Lions pack have been tougher in years gone by than they are this year. That'll be tough for them, that matchup alone, as well as obviously Khaleesi in the back line, or in the back row. Always a danger man and a talisman for them.
Brilliant player, and on his day he can be so rangy and so difficult to deal with. He's grown into a very mature operator. Like he in that game where they beat the Lions pre-season, they beat them 34-21 in Ellis Park. So now having bring them to Cape Town, they'll be confident again.
Quietly confident going into this.
But they're like, see, Khaleesi scored a good try where the maul was pivoting its way into touch, and he just broke it exactly the right time, beat his man very nicely. He just has all those smart plays in him. And then in the back line, they have some firecrackers out there as well. They have Gallant, who for my mind is front runner, if getting closer and closer to being nailed down starter in the Springboks at fullback. He looks very, very sharp. They've got Ciabello Sinatla, another sevens killer on the wing.
Speed for days. And then in the halfbacks, you have Herschel and Willemse, who were a little sloppy in the
those
goal.
boys
they need to kind of up their game to the level we know they can both reach. They've looked a little pre-season, which we'll forgive. It's obviously,
frankly, they were very poor in the Springbok showdown, both of them. Especially Willemse.
But Herschel too was nowhere near the force. He forced his way into that Springbok side by the virtue of just playing really, really good rugby. It would be lovely to see him reach that level again. But as you say, just looking at on paper, that Stormers outfit is a serious team.
Very tidy.
By contrast, the Lions like they have some pretty players as well. They obviously have made some acquisitions. Marvin Ori, Jaco Creel, and Willem Alberts. Big job for them to do.
Yeah, Willem Alberts, old stalwart, used to be a back rower. He's now moving into the second row. I thought Ori in there with him was brilliant.
Yes,
I think he's like he there he is there in our picture. I think he's got a lot of I think he's got a lot to give for the Lions in South Africa. He's a nice rangy runner and can be nice and physical as well. And Jaco Creel, obviously, we know very well, very close to Springbok caliber player as well. So those guys, in terms of cancelling out what the Stormers are going to be bringing, it's a lot
is on them, because those are the 3 top level guys. There are also a few jerseys in that Lions pack that are filled by guys who are definitely not on the same level as the Stormers. So they will need to try and make it about skill and flair, and try and out-skill and flair the Stormers. That is obviously the Lions' way. They do provide that in the context of Super Rugby in South Africa a lot of the time, which she has been playing up north the last few seasons. They need to try and use tempo to try and
keep bringing the tempo. Elton, keep bringing the width. The crossfield kicks are good. Absolutely work them in. Check the defence. Put them under pressure as often and as well as you can. And try and make a game of it. But if you're asking who I think will come out on top, I think the Stormers. I think the Stormers might be shifting into favourites for this competition.
Maybe depending on especially after that Sharks first week showing. That's possibly where they are. Well, certainly if the Lions lose this game, although it's back-to-back away fixtures to start,
it's also back-to-back L's.
If it's back-to-back L's, it puts you obviously on the back foot. It's very tough to win any competition. Well, after opening back-to-back
Spider-Man on the ropes.
Yeah, possibly. But I suppose that's it then.
The Sharks have the bye this week, so that's all the games this week, and onwards it ticks. Super Rugby Unlocked, and we're enjoying it so far. Great to have South African rugby back, and it's just our bellies are full of all the rugby we're getting these days,
and it's delicious because we were on a rugby diet, strict rugby diet for lockdown. It was
rugby hunger strike.
Yeah, indeed,
brutal.
No fun. So definitely a joy to see the Springbok. The Springboks and just the South African teams back in action.
Sure. And it's great stuff.
Yes. So then we will move on, I guess. We just have a few other notable games around the world in the Mitre 10, which is in New Zealand, for those who don't know. We have Auckland v Tasman on Saturday at 4:35, as well as Canterbury v Waikato.
Which is Sunday at 1:15.
Yes.
That's AM, by the way. Those are brutal British Standard Time and Irish Time times. Those are disgusting in many ways. But Canterbury Waikato, Auckland v Tasman, first of all, is 1 and 2, and Canterbury Waikato is 3 and 4, which is why I put it down. It's actually a climactic big weekend in the Mitre 10. And Canterbury Waikato is a curtain raiser for the Bledisloe 2 test.
There you go. Okay,
so that's quite a nice one.
Interesting. That's good.
Could be one to watch. And the other one that I just noted is that Premier 15s, the women's professional league in England, is underway.
Excellent.
And that started last week, but a lot of teams are playing their first outings this week as well. So it's great to see the women's professional game existing at a domestic level. That's great. And
returning post-COVID is obviously huge as well. Huge for the guys. Great news, to be honest.
Yeah, fantastic to see that back, and available to watch, I believe, as well for those who want to seek it out. So great stuff.
Absolutely. With that, we're going to wrap up this marathon show. It's another long one for you, but
they get
wrap
longer
up, as we always do, with the rugby news of the week.
Yes.
So there are a few little nuggets here. First off,
squad news.
Nemani Nadolo back from international retirement to join Fiji for their upcoming.
It's almost as if his international retirement wasn't a well thought out decision by Nemani to just not play for Fiji anymore, and something more malicious,
strong-armed Montpellier move.
Yes, and now he's out of Montpellier and he can play for Fiji again, which I find disgusting.
It's credit in the bank of Leicester, who is a team that I'm not a huge fan of
nobody
these days.
Does it quite like the French teams.
Nobody, and even at that, no French team does it quite like Montpellier. It's nasty is what it is.
Yeah, the way they put pressure on tier 2 players to prevent them from going to World Cups so that they can perform better in their little domestic league while the World Cup's going on is just sickening. And they ended up. By the way, Nemani Nadolo missed the season to play a bunch of games for Montpellier that were voided. It was a voided season in the end. So there you go.
He didn't go to the World Cup.
But you got to look forward, not back. And looking forward, they talent. Listen to this Fijian potential backline that they could pick. They got Frank Lamani at 9, Ben Volavola at 10. Now they could have centres, Bhatia and Radradra, Then in the back three, they could have Nadolo on the left wing, Tuisova on the right wing, and Murray Valu at fullback.
It's pretty
that
box
is
office.
Phenomenal. It's as talent in that team, like Bodia, and then with Ranradra in that set. What a combination! And then Tuisova, who was one of the players of the World Cup, partnered with Nadolo, who has been one of the best wingers in the world.
Yeah,
there is such talent, mouth-watering talent.
Yeah, it's
in that Fiji backline.
They always have.
They're playing
talent.
Scotland and Italy and France.
It's potentially the last time they played France, they won. Yeah,
they could really give this a rumble. They've got Vern Cotter in charge.
Yes,
serious coach.
Yes.
They look much more serious.
They do, and it's great to see because who among us as rugby purists and rugby fans doesn't love seeing Fiji with all their eggs in their basket and all playing lovely rugby. Like if they can get out of their own way long enough, or the Eleanor can get out of their way long enough, it's lovely to see them string.
What I will say is that they are missing some of their back row spice. Their captain from last year, Wakani Barutu, he's gone. I think he's retired actually. But they're also missing Kunatani, who's in this sort of weird place where he's a free agent and he failed a medical at Cast, and he's like when he's on his blow he's brilliant, but he's out of this squad. So I don't really know what the story is with him. Perseliato injured
perpetually for Clermont, seemingly.
Viliami Mata injured.
Unfortunate.
So that they're missing some back row power. They do have Leone Nakarawa, but he's and Matavesi in at hooker as well. But outside of that, there's a lot of inexperience in that pack, and that is where other teams will be looking to attack
to capitalise on them for sure. But still exciting news. Scotland squad named as well, and Finn is back. The return of Finn. More returning news. Gregor and his Finn feud are now finished.
He was contrite enough, was Gregor, when he was talking about that. He was just saying he wishes he handled it differently, and he feels he knows how to handle Finn a little better this time.
Yes.
But
maybe
Finn
shouldn't have dropped my best player.
Yeah, well, it's like Finn has his issues, personality wise. Sometimes I think he's brilliant, but he's a guy who's Scotland. He is imperative to Scotland.
For Scotland and for Gregor to implement the kind of rugby he wants Scotland playing.
Yes,
you need to have Finn there. Like obviously, he wants them to be a tempo-driven team with accurate long passes and some sweeping attacking moves. You can't trust Gavin Hastings or not Gavin. What's his first name? Adam Hastings. Like Hastings is a nice player, but he's not Finn Russell. That's your box office guy. It's good to see him back, kind of order restored in that regard. And a few other exciting potential debutants as well. You have Ollie Kebble, who's looked huge this season. Post lockdown, he's looked very, very big for Glasgow. And Edinburgh winger Duhan van der Merwe, who's had a good try scoring knack about him, and
he's a very solid player. Ollie Kebble is very exciting as well. Like they could have a scrum with Sutherland or Kebble. They're like those are going to be their two.
They can
props.
rotate, so they'll have bench impact.
Those are two. Like it's hard to overstate. Kebble is South African based, but he's been phenomenal for Glasgow, and Sutherland has been phenomenal as well. Those are two very aggressive scrummaging props, and it's been a while since Scotland have scrummed at the top level, and they showed signs of it through Sutherland in the Six Nations. They were actually getting on top of all kinds of teams, of England's and Ireland's.
Yes,
they were getting on top of them at scrum time, and so to see an aggressive scrum is just a very useful tool to have in their box that they haven't in recent years.
For sure, and it might tip the scales in favour of them against Fiji.
If Scotland can get a bonus point win against Wales in the last round of the Six Nations, and Italy beat Ireland and England, they will win the Six Nations.
There you go. It's still not quite in their hands, but it's not out of sight either. So
beat the French.
Maybe the brave Scots will put it up to someone.
I think they'll also need Ireland to beat France. Ireland to lose to Italy and then beat France, and England just to lose to Italy. They need Italy to go on quite a run.
They do, yes. They need favours from the Italians, so I don't know if they'll get them. But by God, it's good. It'll just be good to see them back in action. And hopefully, with Finn, all the strings in their bow and all of them firing, renewed scrum energy, also good to see. Then in slightly worse news closer to home, we have a bit of an Ireland injury crisis unfolding at the moment.
We do.
We were noticing a few weeks ago actually in Leinster that it is not affecting Ireland, but there are a few Leinster squad players with tight hamstrings and all kinds of weird muscle spasms, and that seems to have bled over now into Ireland preparing for the Six Nations.
It's something that they mentioned a lot in the NFL as well, that there's just an inordinate amount of soft tissue injuries as a result of the lack of proper prep for the season. And I think we noticed that certainly a bit in Leinster. You've seen a lot of soft tissue issues, and there's now a proper injury crisis. I mean, those Benetton buggers in that Leinster game the other day, a lot to answer for.
Benetton are tough.
A tough team to play, and so it's led to a situation. Ireland did name their squad. They named Gibson Park in there for the first time, which is great news.
James Lowe is training with the squad as well.
Yes,
good news.
I would love to see. I think Marmion's the third scrum half, so there's a chance for nice aggressive calling there.
Yeah.
But as you say, there's an injury crisis. I mean, we have Jordan Larmour with a dislocated shoulder ruled out until next year.
Terrible.
Max Deegan, torn ACL. He's a young, exciting back rower. He's not going to be involved. Sexton is a doubt with a hamstring injury. Furlong is still perpetually missing with a calf injury. Andrew Porter's gone. Ryan Baird, who was a guy we were super excited about. If you're not from Ireland, you wouldn't be familiar with him yet, but he is a brilliant lock. Who's going to be James Ryan's partner in at lock going forward. He's a sensational talent, but he is now out for this with an injury.
A groin injury of some kind.
Yeah. Yes, and Dan Levy, still no sign of him, still not back. Another bad injury for Ireland as well there.
Yeah, so it's just a long list, and certainly with Porter and Furlong, the tight
Sexton.
Well, the tight head and 10, both pretty key areas and both significantly diminished. That's obviously not good news, not just from an Ireland point of view, but from the point of view of the Six Nations. You want to see the best players, you want to see them on the field, you don't want to see them sidelined through injury, so that's obviously unfortunate.
In further squad news, there's 3 Saracens are going to be playing against the Barbarians in the upcoming game.
Quilter Cup, as I didn't realise it was called, but whenever England play the Babas.
It's a bang out in Twickenham against the Babas that they do every year, and it's glad to see it continuing even if it is in October.
Yes.
But good sign off for good couple of dynamics. Richard Wigglesworth, good to see him get in. Although he is not very much a Barbarian style player, he deserves
a nod.
Jackson Ray likewise, and then Manu Vunipola will get a chance to play against the 2 big brothers.
Yes, which could be dangerous for him, but it'll still.
Are they too nice to smash him?
No. No, I think
I reckon Mako.
I think the nice thing for them to. I think part of their identity would be it's a nice thing to smash him.
Do you know what?
Welcome to the big league.
I think
smash.
I think Mako would soft out of it a little. He's his little brother, and he's the older guy. I don't think Mako would smash him if given the opportunity. I think Billy would. I think Billy would 100%.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that's
that's right. But it'll be it'll be good one to keep an eye on, and it's obviously good for those 3 being Sarries men to get some international footy before vanishing down to the abyss for a season at least. Then other bad news from England as well. 4 Wasps players and 3 of their backroom staff have only today, Wednesday as we shoot this, tested positive for COVID and are now self-isolating.
Yeah, this is
terrible news because Exeter got the all clear after a string of COVID tests. Obviously, their final is next week.
Postpone it.
If that's
I would postpone it now. I mean, they have.
Depends who they are, depends how rampant it is. They will obviously.
You could almost play it after the international window. I know that's crazy, but I mean, I don't think they can afford to have another. They can't afford to have their final ruined by this, and they need to be adjustable. Yeah. That's the problem with the Premiership and their cram it through philosophy is that they've backed themselves into a corner where they can't be adjustable.
Yeah, there's no
Munster had some positive testers. Now listen, here's hoping everybody's fine and it's only a small outbreak and it doesn't break through the rest of the team quite like it did with Sale.
Yeah.
But who knows? It's a tight environment, and once it gets in, it tends to spread.
Pretty rapid spreading thing, as we all know.
So obviously, best wishes with Wasps and all of those guys who tested positive.
Because Wasps are the form team post lockdown in the whole country.
Yeah.
They have looked brilliant.
But what you can't do if you're the Premiership is start punishing teams for getting the virus. It happens, and you need to be adjustable. Munster had a couple of cases the other day, and thankfully it didn't spread through their unit, but they had a couple of isolated cases. And what the Pro 14 were very quick in is coming and saying, listen, if you need to reschedule, that's fine. We have open windows during the Six Nations period, etc., etc. We can fit your game in there, that's no problem. Yeah. Now obviously it's a little different with the final where your first instinct would be move it back a couple of weeks, you're not playing for ages, but obviously if there's England duties going on, it's tough to play a Premiership final without England internationals. In fact, it's crazy.
Yes.
So, but there's no reason at all why they couldn't push it even further back, and while that might seem like an emergency cannot allow scenario to these big wigs in the Premiership, it's actually a much better solution than ruining your competition by forcing teams to play
even when
the virus is spreading in their bleeding team. Yeah.
So that was obviously gutting news that we got today. In better news, Kazuki Himeno has joined the Highlanders for 2021 Super Rugby Aotearoa. That's great. We love Himeno. Himeno, for those who don't remember, stalwart in the Japanese team, one of the heroes of the World Cup.
Very best players last year. You should remember if you don't. He's an awesome number 8, and it's going to be great to see him playing in Super Rugby Aotearoa. It's a little selfish on our part because we actually we haven't really seeked out and watched, and we don't have broadcast the Japanese league over here, so we often don't get to see a lot of these guys. So when one of them moves to a competition we are watching, we're very excited about that.
For sure. So this is good news. Rather than bad news, this is good news.
Yes.
And then in more bad news, the Eleanor have been threatening to withhold players from test duty for France's warm-up game with Wales next week. They're also threatening World Rugby for opening the emergency test window from October 19th to December 5th.
They're threatening to sue. They are as small-minded and bitter as ever, the Eleanor. They are such a cancer in the game, I think.
Well, certainly as far as French rugby, they are a big pillar in their way. Like the stepping stone, there's not that much distance to cover for French rugby to go from, well, truly abysmal as it was a few seasons ago. It's got all the way back up to competent and very decent in the last couple of seasons. There's potential for it to be great, as there always is, because their player base is so good and their instincts for the game are so good. But the LNR are like their biggest obstacle to greatness.
Now they do give a lot of tier 2 players good employment.
Oh, they do.
And they are great for the professional game in that regard. But their absolute refusal to buckle in the face of international rugby and prevent it from growing outside of their little world. And frankly, just an ambivalence towards rugby outside of French domestic competition really can just be a stick in the mud. And they're being a stick in the mud again. It's coronavirus times. You know, you can reschedule your games if you want, or I don't care what you do. Just play your games without your internationals. It is not reasonable to withhold players from the French team because you're just not happy about it.
Yeah.
The French team is what makes money as well for the French Union. But anyway, they're going mad on it. They're giving out the business, and it looks like, I was reading today, it looks like the solution they're going to arrive at is that no player can play more than 4 weeks of the 6-week window.
So you're just going to have a baffling hodgepodge of squad rotation / no settling / ridiculousness. Yeah. More of the same.
Good news for
French,
Fiji, potentially.
Potentially good news for Fiji and Scotland.
Although some of those Fijian players won't be like Leonie Nakarada.
No, they will be deprived that too.
So
it's a little sickening again, but that is the Eleanor's MO when it comes to international windows.
Finally, we have the news brewing. I would say we were hoping to get the podcast done when we actually knew this news, but it's been pushed back 48 hours. The Springboks are deliberating and deciding whether or not to pull out of the Rugby Championship. I've heard all kinds of whispers about whether it's going to go this way or that. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, there was an Australian piece I was reading that seemed very confident they would play because of all the financial reasons to do so and the potential losses in not playing. But then there's also people who are saying they're absolutely not going to play and they don't want to risk their players and they don't want to knock their squad down. And for them, it's all about the Lions tour. Yeah. And they just seem to be getting addicted to the idea of giving the other Sanzar nations a bit of a middle finger. They're enjoying themselves.
They seem to be enjoying it. Well, they certainly are, as always in the last few weeks, at the very heart of all things international rugby in terms of the dynamics. It's the SARU are very
big role to play.
They seem to be, yes. And we don't know yet the decision. As you say, it'll be 48 hours from when we shoot this. That's Wednesday, it'll be Thursday. It'll probably be out by the weekend, potentially by the time you're watching this. But it is just interesting to see that.
Yeah. Okay, and with that we're going to wrap up the show. I have just realised that our audio is going to have an issue, so apologies for listening to the camera audio for this last however long. But listen, we're going to wrap it up there. We've obviously been going way too long, so we're going to finish it up. We'll be back next week after another round of excellent Bledisloe rugby and a Champions Cup final and all of that good stuff to bring you Six Nations previews as Test Rugby heats up and the season really gets underway. So listen, thanks very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please feel free to like, subscribe,
ring the bell,
ring the bell of notifications, and share as well if you can. If you have any friends you might be interested, and mainly give comments.
Leave a comment.
Get some chat going.
Let's have a little bit of dynamic, constructive rugby comments. Keep it nice, but keep it intelligent. But leave a comment because we do enjoy reading them for sure.
Absolutely. All right, listen. Goodbye.
Bye. You're up.
Oh, that was not good. Oh, wide as well.
Crooked feed.
Irritating.